The Northern Darkness had consumed 4 packs in 6 months. Warriors who'd never known defeat died screaming. Alphas whose power could shake mountains fell to their knees, hollow-eyed and broken. Ancient magic failed, evacuation failed, fighting failed, hiding failed. Every strategy ended the same way. Entire territories turned to ash, survivors few and traumatized. Speaking of despair, that moved like living smoke. Silvercrest Pack was next. Everyone knew it. The question wasn't if the darkness would come, but whether they'd survive it. And their alpha, prophecy cursed and mate rejected, couldn't even find a Luna to stand beside him when it arrived. 7 candidates failed his trial. 7 she-wolves, who should have been perfect, crumbled before challenges no one would explain. Then Sherry Brennan stepped forward. A rejected Omega with nothing left to lose, a wolf who'd already survived her own personal darkness and learned to stand in the ruins. No one expected her to pass the trial. No one expected a broken wolf to be exactly what a doomed pack needed. Chapter 1. The Rejection. Sherry Brennan had stopped believing in fairy tales exactly 347 days ago. That was how long it had been since Alpha Guy Knight looked into her eyes at the moonrise ceremony, felt the mate bond snap into place between them, and said 5 words that destroyed her. "I reject you, Sherry Brennan." Not, "I can't accept this," not, "I need time." Just cold, absolute rejection in front of the entire pack, with the full moon bearing witness to her humiliation. The bond had shattered like glass. Sherry remembered falling to her knees in the ceremonial circle, remembered the gasping pain in her chest as something fundamental tore loose inside her, remembered the way the other pack members averted their eyes. Even her own mother had looked away, as if Sherry's rejection was too shameful to witness. An alpha rejecting his true mate was rare. An alpha rejecting an omega mate was unheard of. Omegas were the weakest rank in the pack hierarchy. Too gentle for warrior training, too soft for leadership, too emotional for the cold calculations of pack politics. Sherry's wolf was small and gray, unremarkable in every way. She had no powerful family connections, no special gifts, no reason for the moon goddess to have chosen her as mate to the strongest alpha in 3 territories. Guy had realized the mistake immediately, and he'd corrected it. Now, Sherry lived in the old cottage at the edge of Packlands, where rejected wolves went to fade into obscurity. She worked in the pack's archives, organizing records that no one read, invisible to everyone who mattered. The other Omegas pitied her. The warriors ignored her. The higher-ranked wolves looked through her as if she were glass. Her mother visited once a month, always with the same sad smile and the same empty reassurances. "You're still part of the pack, Sherry. You still belong here." But belonging and being wanted were 2 very different things. Sherry was shelving century-old pack records when she heard the commotion in the main square. Raised voices, the sharp authority of the beta's command cutting through the autumn air. She should have ignored it. Nothing in the pack's daily drama concerned her anymore. But curiosity pulled her to the archive's narrow window. The sight made her breath catch. 7 she-wolves stood in a line before the pack house, each one radiating confidence and power. Luna candidates. Sherry recognized them from the constant gossip that swirled through the pack, daughters of alphas from the eastern territories, a beta's sister from the coast, a warrior captain who'd won 3 territorial challenges. Beautiful, strong, perfect. Everything Sherry wasn't. "The alpha will see the first candidate now," Beta Van Doyle announced, his voice carrying across the square. "Cecilia Wagner of the Moonwater Pack." Cecilia was stunning, tall and graceful, with silver blonde hair that caught the light like moonbeams. She walked into the pack house with her head high, every inch an alpha's mate. Sherry turned away from the window. It wasn't her business. Guy would choose one of these perfect she-wolves, would take his Luna and build the future he deserved. A future that had never included a weak little Omega who couldn't even hold on to a mate bond the goddess herself had forged. She went back to her records, tried to focus on the faded handwriting in the ledger before her. but even through the thick archive walls, she heard the shouting 30 minutes later. Cecilia Wagner stormed out of the pack house, her face flushed with fury and something else, fear? Her entourage rushed to her side as she climbed into a waiting car. The door slammed, the engine roared. Within minutes, the first Luna candidate was gone. Sherry frowned. That was unexpected. One by one, throughout that day and the next, the other candidates entered the pack house for their trial, and one by one they emerged in various states of distress. Edna Graham came out pale and shaking. Autumn Barton left in tears, supported by her guards. Magdalena Hobbs looked furious, her hands clenched into fists as she marched to her vehicle without a backward glance. By the third day, all 7 candidates had failed. The pack house felt like a tomb, silent and heavy with tension. Sherry caught whispers in the market, fragments of confused gossip. What kind of trial makes an alpha's daughter cry? They say he asked them impossible questions. No, I heard it was a test of strength, and none of them could. My cousin knows someone who knows the beta, and apparently it's not strength at all. It's something about... No one seemed to know what the trial actually involved, only that every single Luna candidate had failed it. Sherry told herself it didn't matter. Guy would find someone eventually. Maybe he'd lower his standards, choose a suitable mate, even if she wasn't perfect. Alphas needed Lunas. It was how pack hierarchy worked, how bloodlines continued, how power remained stable. She was restocking supplies in the archive's storage room when she heard the voice. Sherry Brennan. She spun around so fast she nearly dropped the box in her arms. Beta Van stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Beta. She set down the box carefully, kept her eyes lowered in proper submission. How can I help you? The Alpha requests your presence in the pack house, immediately. Sherry's heart stuttered. What? Why? Van's jaw tightened. That's not for me to say. You're to come now. Fear flooded through her. Had she done something wrong? Broken some pack rule she didn't know about? Was Guy finally going to exile her completely, send her away from even this small cottage, this quiet life she'd built from the ruins of her rejection? I don't understand. Now, Sherry. She followed him across the square on trembling legs, aware of the stairs tracking their progress. Rejected Omega being summoned to the pack house. The gossips would have a feast with this. Van led her through the massive oak doors, down corridors she hadn't walked since the night of her rejection. They stopped before the Alpha's office, the seat of pack power, where all major decisions were made. Van knocked once. Alpha, I've brought her. Send her in. That voice. Deep and commanding, the voice that had spoken her rejection over a year ago. Sherry's hands shook as Van opened the door and gestured her inside. The office was exactly as she remembered. Dark wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the massive desk that had belonged to 3 generations of Silvercrest Alphas, and behind that desk, Alpha Guy Knight. He looked tired. That was Sherry's first thought, the one that slipped past her fear. Guy's dark hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and shadows smudged the skin beneath his steel-gray eyes. He wore a simple black shirt, no formal pack regalia, and something about that felt wrong. Alphas didn't show vulnerability. Sit, he said, nodding to the chair across from his desk. Sherry sat, kept her spine straight, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on a point just past his shoulder, safe, neutral, submissive. Do you know why I called you here? No, Alpha. He sighed, and the sound carried bone-deep exhaustion. 7 candidates, 7 failures. The council is threatening to choose a Luna for me if I don't complete the trial successfully within the month. Sherry said nothing. What could she say? This wasn't her problem. She was the last wolf in the pack who should be involved in choosing the Alpha's mate. Guy stood, moved to the window overlooking the territory. The trial isn't what they think it is. It's not about strength or bloodlines or political alliances. It's about... He stopped himself, shook his head. It doesn't matter what it's about. What matters is that I need someone to pass it, someone who won't fail. Something cold settled in Sherry's stomach. "Why are you telling me this?" He turned to face her, and for just a moment, something flickered in those gray eyes. Regret? Pain? It was gone before she could name it. "Because you're going to take the trial, Sherry. You're going to be my 8th candidate." The world tilted. "What?" "You heard me." No, that's impossible. I'm not a Luna candidate. I'm an Omega. I'm rejected. You're the only option I have left." Sherry shot to her feet, shock overriding proper protocol. "You rejected me in front of the entire pack. You destroyed our mate bond and sent me away, and now you want me to what? Pretend to be Luna material? Let you humiliate me again?" "I'm not going to humiliate you." "Then what do you call this?" Guy's expression hardened into the cold mask she remembered from that terrible night. "I call it necessity. The council wants a Luna. The pack needs stability, and you—" He paused, something complicated crossing his face. "You might actually be able to pass the trial. You might be the only one who can." "That doesn't make any sense. Take the trial, Sherry. Tomorrow at dawn. That's an Alpha's command." The words hit like a physical blow. An Alpha's command couldn't be refused by pack members. It was law, binding as any chain. Sherry stared at him, this male who had broken her heart and shattered her future, who now stood before her asking the impossible. No, not asking, commanding. "And if I fail?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Like the others? You won't fail. How can you possibly know that?" Guy turned back to the window, dismissing her. "Dawn, Sherry, don't be late." Van appeared in the doorway, ready to escort her out. Sherry's legs moved automatically, carrying her out of the office, down the corridor, out into the cooling evening air. She didn't remember the walk back to her cottage, didn't remember closing her door and sinking onto the old couch. All she could think was, what kind of trial makes Alpha daughters cry? And why does Guy think a broken, rejected Omega can pass when they couldn't? Outside her window, the moon began to rise. 3 days until it reached fullness. 3 days until the council's deadline. 3 days until Sherry would face whatever impossible test had defeated 7 perfect Luna candidates. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about how badly this could destroy what little remained of her heart. Tomorrow would come whether she was ready or not. And whatever Guy's trial held. Sherry knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had already survived the worst thing the pack could do to her. She'd survived being unwanted. Anything else would just be details. If you're rooting for Sherry to prove everyone wrong, please like this video. It helps this story reach other readers who need to see that being broken doesn't mean being defeated. Your support means everything. Chapter 2. The trial begins. Dawn came cold and merciless. Sherry stood before the pack house in her simplest dress, gray cotton that matched her wolf, nothing fancy, nothing that pretended she was something she wasn't. Around her, pack members gathered in the square, drawn by the news that had spread like wildfire through the night. The rejected Omega was taking the Luna trial. Their stares burned into her skin, pity from some, curiosity from others, and from a few of the higher-ranked wolves, barely concealed contempt. What was Guy thinking, letting an Omega embarrass the pack like this? Sherry kept her chin up. She'd learned how to endure stares over the past year. Beta Van emerged from the pack house, his face carefully neutral. "The Alpha will see you now, Sherry Brennan." No candidate, no formal title, just her name, stripped of any pretense. She climbed the steps alone. No entourage like the other candidates had brought. No supporters or advisors. Just one rejected Omega walking toward whatever test had broken 7 she-wolves who were better than her in every measurable way. The pack house interior was different this morning. The usual bustle of activity had ceased. No warriors training in the side rooms, no Omegas preparing breakfast in the kitchen, no children running through the halls. It felt abandoned, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Van led her past the Alpha's office, deeper into the pack house than she'd ever been. They descended a staircase she hadn't known existed, stone steps worn smooth by generations of paws and feet. The air grew cooler, damper, ancient. "Where are we going?" Sherry asked. "The trial chamber. It's been sealed for 60 years, only opened when an alpha needs to choose a Luna through the old ways." "The old ways?" Van didn't answer. They'd reached the bottom of the stairs, where a massive wooden door stood, carved with symbols Sherry didn't recognize. Wolves and moons and something else, letters in a language that predated the modern Pax. Van pushed the door open. "Good luck, Sherry. You're going to need it." Then he stepped back, and the door closed behind her with a sound like a tomb ceiling. The chamber was circular, carved from living rock. Torches burned in wall sconces, casting dancing shadows across the stone. And in the center of the room, standing beside a table covered in ancient artifacts, was Alpha Guy Knight. He looked different down here, more raw, more dangerous. His eyes glowed faintly with his wolf's presence, and the alpha power that usually stayed controlled radiated from him in waves that made Sherry's omega instincts scream at her to submit, to kneel, to bare her throat. She locked her knees and stayed standing. "You came," Guy said. "You commanded it. What choice did I have?" Something that might have been respect flickered across his face. "The others could have refused. An alpha's command can be challenged if the wolf is willing to face the consequences. You're braver than you think, Sherry. Or more foolish." She looked around the chamber, at the carved walls, at the artifacts on the table. What is this place? The Chamber of Truth. It was built by the first alphas, when the Pax were young and the moon goddess still walked among us. Guy moved to the table, picked up what looked like an ancient ceremonial knife. "Luna trials used to be simple. Fight the strongest challenger, prove your dominance, take your place at the alpha's side. But the first Silvercrest Luna was an Omega." Sherry's head snapped up. "What? You didn't know?" Guy's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "The Pack historians don't like to talk about it. Doesn't fit the narrative that Lunas must be strong, dominant, perfect. But our founding Luna was the weakest wolf in her pack, and she passed a trial that defeated every warrior who tried." "What kind of trial?" "One that tests what actually matters in a Luna. Not strength, not dominance, not political connections." Guy set down the knife, picked up a small crystal vial filled with silver liquid. "This trial tests truth, Sherry. The ability to see clearly, to judge fairly, to recognize worth even when it's hidden." He crossed to where she stood, held out the vial. Up close, she could see the strain in his face, the tension in his shoulders. Whatever this trial was, it cost him something to administer it. 7 candidates failed, Sherry said quietly. "What happened to them?" "They saw what they needed to see, and they couldn't accept it." Guy's voice dropped lower. "The trial shows you 3 visions, Sherry. 3 moments of truth. In each one, you must make a judgment. Decide who is worthy, who is false, who deserves mercy. Choose correctly, and you pass to the next vision. Choose wrong, and the trial ends." "That's it? Just choosing correctly?" "It's not as simple as it sounds." Guy held the vial up to the torchlight. The liquid inside seemed to move on its own, swirling with inner light. "The visions show you uncomfortable truths, things about yourself, things about the pack, things about—" He stopped himself. The other candidates couldn't face what they saw. Their prejudices, their assumptions, their certainties about how the world should work, all of it got in the way of seeing clearly. Sherry's heart pounded. "And you think I can see clearly? Me? The rejected Omega who couldn't even hold on to her own mate bond?" Guy's expression shuddered. "I think you've had your illusions stripped away. I think you know what it's like to be judged unfairly, to be dismissed because of what you are instead of who you are. I think—" His voice roughened. "I think you might be the only wolf in this territory who can pass this trial with an open heart. You rejected me." The words came out before Sherry could stop them. You felt our mate bond snap into place and you rejected me in front of everyone. You destroyed me, Guy. And now you want me to trust you? To drink some ancient potion and see visions and make judgments about worth? No. Guy's eyes met hers, and for the first time since her rejection, she saw past the Alpha's mask to the man beneath. I want you to trust yourself. The trial doesn't care what I think. It doesn't care about ranks or bonds or pack politics. It only cares about truth. He pressed the vial into her hand. The glass was warm, almost alive against her palm. Drink it, Sherry. Face the visions. Prove that an Omega can see more clearly than an Alpha's daughter. Prove that being broken doesn't mean being blind. Sherry looked down at the vial. Silver liquid swirled inside, hypnotic and terrifying. 7 candidates had drunk this. 7 perfect she-wolves had failed. What made Guy think she would be different? But then she remembered she had nothing left to lose. No mate, no status, no future beyond the archives and her lonely cottage. If she failed this trial, she'd still be rejected, still be invisible, still be unwanted. At least this way, she'd know she tried. Sherry uncorked the vial and drank. The liquid tasted like moonlight and silver and ancient magic. It burned down her throat, spread through her chest, filled her veins with ice and fire. The chamber spun. Guy's face blurred. The torches went dark. And then the first vision slammed into her consciousness like a tidal wave. Vision 1, The Warrior's Choice. Sherry stood in a training yard she didn't recognize. 2 wolves faced each other in the center, one massive and black, the other small and rust-colored. Both were bloodied, panting, clearly at the end of a brutal challenge. "Yield!" the black wolf snarled. His voice carried alpha power, dominant and overwhelming. The rust-colored wolf bared her teeth. "Never. You've lost. Your pack is mine. Yield with dignity or die in dishonor." "My pack will never submit to a tyrant." The black wolf lunged. The rust-colored she-wolf dodged, but she was too slow, too injured. He caught her throat in his jaws, held her pinned to the ground. One bite, and she'd be dead. Then a voice called out from the edge of the yard. "Stop!" A young male ran into the circle, barely past his first shift, skinny and awkward with youth. He threw himself between the 2 wolves. "Please, she's my mother. I'll yield. I'll swear loyalty to you. Just don't kill her." The black wolf released the she-wolf's throat, stepped back. "You would submit where your mother will not?" Yes, I swear on the moon goddess, I'll serve you faithfully. Just let her live." The she-wolf struggled to her feet, blood streaming from her wounds. "Lyle, no." "It's over, Mom. We lost. Let it be over." The black wolf considered them both. Then he shifted to human form, a warrior in his prime, scarred and powerful. "Your oath or your mother's life. Choose." The vision froze, and Sherry heard Guy's voice, echoing from nowhere and everywhere. Who is worthy of mercy, the mother who would die rather than submit, or the son who would sacrifice his pride to save her? Choose. Sherry's mind raced. The obvious answer was the mother, brave, uncompromising, willing to die for her principles. That's what a Luna should value, right? Strength, courage, refusal to bow. But she looked at the young male again, really looked, saw the terror in his eyes, the desperate love, the way his body shook with the effort of standing between his mother and death. The mother was brave, but the son was wise. The mother would die for her pride and leave her pack leaderless, her wolves scattered or slaughtered. The son saw the larger picture, that survival sometimes meant swallowing your pride, that protecting your people mattered more than personal honor. "The son," Sherry whispered, "the son is worthy of mercy, because he understands that leadership isn't about never bending. It's about knowing when bending saves lives." The vision shattered like glass. Sherry gasped, back in the chamber. Guy caught her elbow as she swayed. "One down," he said quietly. 2 to go. What was that? Did that really happen? 60 years ago. That young male became Beta of the Eastern Territory. His mother died in the next challenge because she never learned to bend. Guy steadied her. The first candidate, Cecilia Wagner, she chose the mother, said the son was a coward for submitting. But he saved his pack. Cecilia couldn't see that. All she saw was submission, and to her, submission was weakness. Guy's hand lingered on her arm. You saw differently. Before Sherry could respond, the chamber spun again. The second vision rose up to claim her. Vision 2. The healer's burden. A small cottage. An old she-wolf lying in bed, dying. Two figures stood beside her, a healer with gentle hands and a male who looked like the dying wolf's son. "There's nothing more I can do," the healer said softly. "The sickness has taken too deep. I can ease her pain, but I cannot save her." "Then ease it," the son's voice broke. "Please, don't let her suffer." The healer reached for a bottle on the bedside table. Her hands trembled as she measured out a dose, then stopped. "This will end her pain, but it will also end her life. The law says I must let her pass naturally, that hastening death is forbidden, even for mercy. The law is cruel. The law protects us from those who would kill disguised as healing." The old she-wolf's eyes opened. She looked at her son, at the healer. "Please," she whispered, "let me go. I'm tired. I'm so tired." The son turned to the healer. "I'm asking you to break the law, to show mercy, to end her suffering. And if I'm caught, if the pack elders discover what I've done, I'll protect you. I swear it. Your oath won't stop them from exiling me, from declaring me a murderer." The healer's hands shook harder. "But she's suffering, and I became a healer to ease suffering." The vision froze. Guy's voice. Who is in the right? The healer who follows the law, even when it causes suffering? Or the healer who breaks it, even when mercy might destroy her? Choose. Sherry stared at the frozen scene. This was harder, more complex. Both choices had merit. Both had consequences. The law existed for good reason, to prevent abuse, to protect the vulnerable. But the law was also rigid, unable to account for individual circumstances, for cases where mercy might matter more than rules. She thought about her own experience, about how pack law said an alpha could reject a mate, how no one had questioned Guy's right to destroy their bond, even though it had nearly destroyed her. The law had protected him and abandoned her. Sometimes the law was wrong. The healer who shows mercy, Sherry said, because laws should serve compassion, not replace it. Because the moon goddess gave us judgment, so we could choose kindness over cruelty, even when cruelty is legal. The vision shattered. Sherry collapsed to her knees this time. The visions were taking more out of her than she'd expected. Guy knelt beside her, steadied her with a hand on her shoulder. "Two down," he said. His voice carried something that might have been pride. Magdalena Hobbs chose the other way. Said laws exist for a reason, that personal feelings can't override pack safety. She failed the trial right there. Was she wrong? No, she was right from a certain perspective. But Aluna needs to see beyond the rules to the hearts beneath them. You saw that. You chose compassion over certainty. Guy's hand tightened on her shoulder. "One more vision, Sherry. The hardest one. I don't know if I can—" "You can. You're stronger than you think." The chamber swirled again, and the third vision rose like a nightmare made real. Vision 3. The Rejected Bond. Sherry stood in a ceremonial circle under a full moon. She recognized this place, this moment. This was the night of her rejection. She saw herself, younger, more hopeful, wearing the white dress reserved for mate bonding ceremonies. Saw the way her face lit up when Alpha Guy Knight stepped into the circle, saw the exact moment the mate bond snapped into place between them, golden and bright and perfect. And then she watched Guy's expression shudder, watched him take one look at her, at the plain Omega, who couldn't possibly be worthy, and make his choice. I reject you, Sherry Brennan. She watched herself fall, watched the bond shatter, watched her mother look away in shame, watched the pack murmur and whisper and judge. But this time the vision didn't stop there. It followed Guy as he walked away from the ceremony, showed him alone in his office, hands clenched into fists, his wolf howling in agony inside him, showed him clawing at his own chest as if he could tear out the pain of a severed mate bond. I had to, he whispered to the empty room. I had to protect her. The vision shifted, showed a meeting between Guy and 3 elder wolves Sherry didn't recognize, dark-robed, ancient, powerful. The Omega cannot be your Luna, the eldest said. Our prophecy is clear. If the Alpha bonds with one so weak, the pack will fall to the darkness coming from the north. You must reject her. You must choose strength. She is my mate. The moon goddess chose. The goddess makes mistakes. The prophecy does not. Reject her, Alpha Knight. Save your pack. The vision showed Guy's face, the agony of choice, the impossible decision, duty or destiny, his pack or his mate. He chose duty. The vision froze. Guy's voice, rough with emotion. Who deserves judgment? The Alpha who rejected his mate to save his pack? Or the Omega who was sacrificed for a prophecy she never knew existed? Choose. Sherry couldn't breathe. All this time, she'd thought Guy rejected her because she wasn't good enough, because an Omega wasn't worthy of an Alpha, because she was broken and plain and weak. But he'd rejected her to protect her, to save the pack, because someone had told him their bond would bring destruction. The anger she'd carried for over a year warred with sudden, devastating understanding. Guy had suffered too. He'd torn apart his own soul to follow what he believed was right. But that didn't make what he'd done to her acceptable. It didn't erase her pain. Good intentions didn't heal shattered bonds. Both, Sherry whispered, both deserve judgment. Guy for making a choice that destroyed us without giving me a voice in it. And me, her voice cracked, me for believing I was worthless instead of asking why. For accepting rejection instead of demanding truth. She looked up at the frozen vision, at the image of Guy's anguished face. We both made mistakes. We both deserve consequences. But we also both deserve... The words stuck in her throat. Forgiveness. Because sometimes the choices we make to protect others are the ones that hurt us most. The vision exploded into light. Sherry came back to herself screaming. Guy caught her as she fell, held her against his chest as she sobbed. The visions had ripped open every wound she'd tried to heal, exposed every truth she'd tried to bury. You passed, Guy said into her hair. His voice shook. Sherry, you passed. All 3 visions. You're the first in 60 years to... You lied to me! She shoved him away, fury and grief and betrayal burning through her. You let me think I wasn't good enough. You let me hate myself for over a year when you were the one who... I know, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. Tears streamed down her face. You broke me, Guy. You shattered our bond and sent me away and let me believe I was worthless. And for what? Some prophecy from ancient wolves who think they know better than the moon goddess? I was trying to protect you. I didn't need protection. I needed truth. I needed my mate to trust me enough to make that choice together, instead of deciding my entire future without me. Guy reached for her, then stopped himself. You're right. About all of it. I made the wrong choice. I thought I was being noble, thought I was saving you from a darkness I couldn't explain, but I just... His voice broke. I just destroyed us both. Sherry wiped her eyes, tried to steady her breathing. The chamber felt too small suddenly, the air too thick. Why now? Why bring me back for this trial? Why not just let me stay rejected and invisible? Because the prophecy was wrong. She stared at him. Guy ran a hand through his hair, looking more lost than any Alpha should. The darkness from the north. It came anyway. 3 packs have fallen in the past 6 months. The threat the elders warned me about? It's here, and rejecting you didn't stop it. Didn't even slow it down. I destroyed our bond for nothing, Sherry. For a lie. So what? You want me to be your Luna now? Now that your prophecy failed and you need someone to pass this trial before the council forces a mate on you? No. Guy's eyes met hers, and the raw honesty in them stole her breath. I want you to choose. The trial proves you're worthy, proves what I should have known from the beginning. You see clearly, you judge fairly, you understand mercy and truth in ways those perfect candidates never could. You would make an incredible Luna. But I won't command it. I won't force another choice on you. Guy stepped back, gave her space. You passed the trial, Sherry. The pack has to acknowledge your worthiness now. What you do with that acknowledgement, whether you accept the Luna position, whether you ever forgive me, whether you stay or go, that's your decision. Not mine, not the council's, yours. Sherry looked at him, this male who had been her mate for one perfect moment before becoming her destroyer, tried to reconcile the alpha who'd rejected her with the man who'd suffered silently for over a year. Tried to decide if understanding his reasons meant she had to forgive his choices. I need time, she said finally. The trial might prove I can judge others fairly, but I don't know if I can judge us, clearly yet. Take all the time you need. And if I decide I don't want to be Luna? If I pass the trial but reject the position? Guy's smile was sad. Then you'll be the first wolf in pack history to turn down a Luna throne. But it would be your choice, and I would respect it. Comment. What would you do in Sherry's position? Sherry turned toward the door, then stopped. One more question burned in her mind. The other candidates. Why did they fail? What did they choose wrong? Cecilia chose pride over wisdom in the first vision. Magdalena chose law over mercy in the second. The others? Guy's voice went soft. In the third vision, they all chose the Alpha over the Omega, said I deserved support for making a hard choice, that you should accept rejection gracefully. They couldn't see that we both deserved judgment. That's why they failed. They couldn't see an Omega as equal to an Alpha. Exactly. But you did. You saw us both as flawed people making mistakes. Guy met her eyes. You saw the truth, Sherry, even when it hurt, even when it would have been easier to just condemn me. Sherry nodded slowly. Then she walked out of the chamber, up the stone stairs, into the morning light. The pack waited in the square, silent and shocked. Beta Van stepped forward, his expression unreadable. The trial? He asked. Passed, Sherry said. Her voice didn't shake. All three visions. The square erupted into chaos. But Sherry barely heard it. She walked through the crowd, through the stares and whispers and shock, back to her cottage at the edge of Packlands. She'd passed an impossible trial, proved herself worthy, earned a place that 7 perfect candidates had been denied. Now she just had to decide if she wanted it. Chapter 3. The Price of Truth. The cottage felt different when Sherry closed the door behind her. Or maybe she was the one who'd changed. Hard to tell when your entire understanding of the past year had been shattered in 3 visions and a confession that rewrote everything you thought you knew. She sat on the worn couch, still trembling from the trial. Her mind kept replaying the third vision, Guy's face as he made the choice to reject her, the elder's prophecy, the year of silent suffering he'd endured. It would have been easier if he'd just been cruel, if he'd rejected her out of pride or disgust or simple indifference. But he'd rejected her trying to save her, trying to protect the pack. And somehow that made it worse, because it meant her pain had been deemed acceptable collateral damage in someone else's plan. A knock on the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Sherry?" A female voice, familiar. "It's Teresa. Can I come in?" Teresa Ramsey, one of the few wolves who'd stayed friendly after the rejection, though even she'd kept her distance. Being kind to the rejected Omega wasn't exactly good for one's social standing. Sherry opened the door. Teresa stood there with a basket of food and an expression caught between concern and curiosity. The whole pack's talking about what happened, Teresa said, slipping inside. You passed the trial that broke Cecilia Wagner and made Magdalena Hobbs leave crying. How are you even standing? I'm not sure I am. Sherry accepted the basket numbly. Fresh bread, cheese, fruit, comfort food. Thank you for this. Are you kidding? You're about to be Luna. I'm investing in our future friendship. Teresa's attempt at humor fell flat when she saw Sherry's face. Oh no. You're not actually considering turning it down, are you? I don't know what I'm considering. Sherry. Teresa gripped her shoulders. Do you understand what you've done? An Omega passed the Luna trial. You've rewritten every assumption this pack has about rank and worth. You're a legend now. I'm a confused, traumatized wolf who just found out her rejection was based on a failed prophecy. Teresa's eyes widened. What? Sherry told her. Everything. The visions, Guy's confession, the elder's prophecy about darkness from the north. By the time she finished, Teresa had sunk into the chair across from her, looking stunned. So he rejected you to save the pack, Teresa said slowly. And the pack fell anyway. Gods, that's tragic for both of you. Is it? Sherry's voice came out sharper than intended, because from where I'm sitting, Guy made a choice that destroyed me without giving me any say in it. Good intentions don't erase that. No, they don't. Teresa leaned forward. But they do complicate things. If he'd rejected you out of cruelty, you could hate him cleanly. This is messy. This is two people hurt by circumstances bigger than both of them. The trial showed me that we both deserve judgment, Sherry whispered. But I don't know how to judge this, Teresa. I don't know if understanding why he did it means I have to forgive him. Maybe you don't have to decide that right now. Maybe you just have to decide whether you want to be Luna, independent of Guy, independent of the mate bond that was rejected. Do you want the position itself? Did she? Sherry had never aspired to leadership, never imagined herself as anything more than what she was, a quiet Omega who preferred books to politics, solitude to pack dynamics. The idea of becoming Luna, of standing at the center of pack attention, of making decisions that affected hundreds of wolves. It terrified her. But there was something else too, something the trial had awakened, a small, fierce part of her that had seen those visions and known, absolutely known, what justice looked like, what mercy required, what truth demanded. She'd made the right choices, not because she was strong or dominant or perfect, but because she could see clearly, because being broken had taught her to look past surfaces to the hearts beneath. I think, Sherry said slowly, I might be good at it, being Luna, not in the traditional way, but in the way that actually matters, Teresa finished. In the way the trial tests for. A commotion outside made them both turn toward the window, raised voices, the sharp bark of command. Sherry recognized Beta Van's voice cutting through the noise. She opened the door to find half the pack leadership standing in her small yard. Van, the head warrior Fernando Haas, the pack healer Roseanne Day, and 3 council elders she recognized by their ceremonial robes. Sherry Brennan, the eldest, a severe-looking she-wolf named Nelda Robertson, stepped forward. We need to speak with you, now. Teresa squeezed Sherry's hand once, then slipped away. Suddenly, Sherry stood alone facing the pack's power structure, all of them gathered on her doorstep like she was important enough to warrant a house call. Because she was. She'd passed the trial. She was technically Luna-elect, whether she'd accepted the position or not. Come in, Sherry said, trying to keep her voice steady. Though I don't have enough chairs for everyone. We won't be long, Nelda said. But they filed in anyway, filling the small cottage with their presence and power. We've come to discuss the trial results. I passed. Guy confirmed it. Alpha Knight confirmed it. Nelda corrected sharply. And yes, you passed. All 3 visions correctly answered, which presents us with a situation. Fernando crossed his arms. An Omega hasn't served as Luna in this pack for 200 years. The precedent is concerning. Concerning how? Sherry kept her tone neutral, but anger simmered beneath. The trial doesn't test for rank, it tests for judgment. Are you saying my judgment is flawed? Your judgment proved sound, Roseanne interjected, shooting Fernando a quelling look. But Elder Robertson is right. This creates complications. The other packs will have questions. Some will see an Omega Luna as weakness, others as an insult to traditional hierarchy. Let them, Van said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at him. The Beta shrugged. The Alpha chose to administer the trial. Sherry passed it. Pack law is clear. She's earned the right to be Luna. What other packs think is irrelevant? It's not irrelevant when those packs control trade agreements and territorial boundaries, Fernando snapped. We can't afford to alienate our allies by installing an Omega as what? Sherry's voice cut through the argument like a blade. As someone who sees clearly enough to recognize worth regardless of rank? As someone who chooses mercy over rigid law? As someone who can judge both an Alpha and an Omega fairly? She stood, met each of their eyes in turn. The trial exists for a reason. It tests for qualities that matter more than bloodlines or physical strength. I passed it. 7 ranked she-wolves failed. Either the trial means something or it doesn't. You don't get to pick and choose based on whether you like the results. Silence fell in the cottage. Nelda studied Sherry with new intensity. You sound like a Luna already. I sound like someone who's tired of being told she's not enough, Sherry corrected. I spent a year believing I deserved rejection because I wasn't strong enough, beautiful enough, dominant enough. Then I passed a trial that's defeated every perfect candidate in 60 years, so forgive me if I'm not particularly interested in your concerns about pack politics and traditional hierarchy. The girl has teeth, Fernando muttered, but there was a hint of respect in his voice now. The question, Roseanne said gently, is what you want, Sherry. The trial proves your worthiness, but it doesn't require you to accept the position. If you choose to decline, we would respect that decision and find another solution for the Alpha's Luna requirement. What other solution? The council members exchanged glances. Nelda spoke carefully. The Alpha would be required to choose a mate from the available candidates, regardless of the trial results. Likely a political alliance, someone from the eastern or coastal territories who could strengthen our position against the northern threat. A loveless match for pack security, Sherry said. Many Alpha pairings are exactly that. Love is not always possible or even advisable. Sherry thought about the vision, about Guy's face as he rejected their mate bond, believing he was saving the pack. About the year of silent suffering that followed, about prophecies that failed and choices that destroyed. I need to speak with Guy, she said. Before I make any decision, I need to talk to him. Alone. Nelda nodded slowly. That's reasonable, but the council needs an answer by tomorrow's sunset. The deadline for the Luna position is 3 days away, and we need time to arrange alternatives if you decline. Tomorrow's sunset, Sherry agreed. I'll have an answer then. They filed out, leaving her alone in the cottage that suddenly felt too small to contain all the questions spinning through her mind. Luna. She could be Luna. Not as Guy's mate. That bond was severed, dead, impossible to recreate. But as the wolf who'd proven herself in the trial, who'd earned the position through merit rather than destiny or politics. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like standing at a crossroads with no map and no certainty about which path led to safety. She found Guy on the training grounds an hour later, fighting 3 warriors at once. It wasn't formal sparring, it was the kind of brutal, exhausting combat wolves engaged in when they needed to quiet their minds through physical pain. Sherry watched from the edge of the yard as Guy took down Billy Holcomb with a move that would leave bruises for days, dodged Patrick Yang's strike, and caught Nathan Love in a hold that forced immediate submission. All 3 warriors were good. Guy was better. When he finally stepped back, breathing hard and bleeding from a dozen minor wounds, he spotted her. The warriors took one look at his expression and found urgent reasons to be elsewhere. Sherry. Guy grabbed a towel, wiped blood from his face. The council found you. They did. They're concerned about political ramifications of an Omega Luna. She moved closer, careful to maintain space between them. They want my answer by tomorrow sunset. What are you going to tell them? I don't know yet. That's why I'm here. Sherry met his eyes. I need to understand something, Guy. If I accept the Luna position, not as your mate, but as the wolf who passed the trial, what exactly does that mean? What would our relationship be? Guy set down the towel. Complicated. I need more than that. He sighed, ran a hand through his hair. Luna and Alpha work together to lead the pack, make decisions jointly, present a unified front to other territories. It's a partnership built on trust and mutual respect, regardless of whether there's a mate bond. But we don't have trust. The words hurt to say. You made a choice without me that destroyed us both. How am I supposed to trust you with pack decisions when you didn't trust me with our own future? You're not yet. Guy's honesty was like a slap. If you accept Luna, we'll have to build trust from nothing. It'll be hard, probably painful. We'll make mistakes. But, he paused. But I think you'd be an incredible Luna, Sherry. Not despite being an Omega, but because of it. You see things others miss. You understand mercy in a way most alphas never learn. The pack needs that, especially now with the northern threat growing. The threat the prophecy was supposed to prevent, Sherry said bitterly. The threat that came anyway. Because the elders were wrong. Their prophecy failed. Guy moved closer, stopped just outside her personal space. I can't undo rejecting you, can't fix what I broke. But I can tell you this. If you choose to be Luna, I will spend every day proving you can trust me again. Not as your mate, that's gone, and I accept the consequences. But as your alpha, your partner in leading this pack. And if I choose to walk away? Decline Luna and leave Silvercrest entirely? Pain flashed across Guy's face. Then I'll make sure you have safe passage to whatever territory you choose and enough resources to start over. You've earned that much, more than that. Sherry studied him, the male who'd been her mate for one perfect moment, the alpha who'd rejected her to follow a failed prophecy, the partner he was offering to become if she chose to accept Luna. I saw you in the vision, she said quietly, saw your face when you made the choice to reject me, saw how much it cost you. It cost us both everything. Yes, it did. She took a breath. But understanding why you did it doesn't mean I've forgiven you, Guy. It doesn't mean I'm ready to trust you. It just means I see the whole picture now instead of only my own pain. That's a start. Is it enough? The question hung between them. Is seeing clearly enough to build a partnership on? Especially when every time I look at you, part of me remembers falling to my knees in that ceremonial circle while the bond shattered? Guy's eyes darkened with old grief. I don't know, but I know the pack needs a Luna who can see clearly more than they need one who has easy trust with her alpha. We can work on trust. We can't manufacture the kind of judgment you showed in that trial. He had a point. The trial had tested for something rare. The ability to judge fairly even when emotions ran high, to see truth even when it hurt, to choose mercy without ignoring justice. Those weren't qualities you learned. Either you had them or you didn't. Sherry had them. The trial had proven it. I need to think, she said. I need tonight to decide if I'm brave enough to accept a position I never wanted, working alongside a male who hurt me deeper than anyone else ever has. Take your time. Whatever you decide, Sherry. Guy's voice roughened. Thank you. For passing the trial, for proving the elders wrong about Omegas and worth, for showing this pack what clear judgment actually looks like. Sherry nodded and turned to leave, but something made her stop at the edge of the training yard, look back at him. The darkness from the north, she said. How bad is it? Bad. 3 packs fallen in 6 months. The 4th is under siege now. Probably won't last the week. What kind of darkness? Rogues? A rival alpha? Guy's expression went grim. We don't know. That's the terrifying part. Scouts who investigate don't come back. The few survivors who escape the fallen packs are too traumatized to give coherent reports. All we know is that something is moving south, destroying everything in its path, and we're directly in its trajectory. And you think a Luna can help with that? I think a Luna who sees clearly might notice things I miss, might make connections I don't see, he paused, might be exactly what we need to survive what's coming. Sherry walked home through the darkening forest, Guy's words echoing in her mind. The northern threat. 3 fallen packs, something dark and unknown moving toward Silvercrest like an inevitable tide. If she declined Luna, Guy would be forced into a political match with someone who'd failed the trial, someone who couldn't judge as clearly, who couldn't see past their own prejudices and assumptions, someone who might make the wrong call when the darkness arrived. But if she accepted, she'd be tying herself to this pack, to Guy, to a partnership built on broken trust and painful history. She'd be choosing to lead alongside the male who'd destroyed her, choosing to put pack needs above her own comfort. The cottage waited, small and safe and familiar. Sherry could pack her few belongings, accept Guy's offer of safe passage, start over somewhere else, be free of Silvercrest, free of the rejection that haunted her, free of the impossible choice between safety and duty. Or she could stay, could accept Luna, could prove that being broken didn't mean being incapable, could lead this pack through whatever darkness was coming, could choose to be brave. Sherry lit the lamps in her cottage and sat at the small table where she'd eaten countless lonely dinners over the past year. Tomorrow's sunset, the council wanted an answer. Tomorrow's sunset, she had to decide who she wanted to be, the rejected Omega who ran from hard choices, or the Luna who passed an impossible trial. She had until sunset to choose. Chapter 4. Shadows Approaching. Sherry didn't sleep that night. She sat at her window watching the moon arc across the sky, thinking about trials and prophecies and the weight of choices that affected more than just yourself. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the visions again. The young male choosing wisdom over pride, the healer choosing mercy over law, and that terrible moment when she'd seen Guy's face as he rejected her. Understanding didn't equal forgiveness, but it did equal something. Context. Complication. The realization that nothing in life was as simple as victim and villain, right and wrong, worthy and worthless. Dawn came too quickly. Sherry dressed carefully in clean clothes. Not fancy, just practical. If she was going to make this decision, she'd do it as herself, not as some polished version she thought others wanted to see. She braided her hair, splashed cold water on her face, and stepped outside. The pack was already stirring. Wolves moved through the square with purpose, but their eyes tracked her cottage. Waiting, wondering. The Omega who'd passed the trial. What would she choose? Sherry walked to the pack house, her heart pounding. She'd made her decision sometime around 3 a.m., watching the stars and thinking about darkness moving south. It wasn't the decision she wanted, but it was the one she could live with. Beta Van met her at the entrance. The council is gathering. They expected you closer to sunset. I know what I want to say. No point in dragging it out. Van studied her face, then nodded. The Alpha is with them. Is that? It's fine. He should hear this too. The council chamber was on the second floor, a formal room with a large circular table and walls lined with pack history. Portraits of past Alphas and Lunas looked down from their frames, generations of strong, dominant wolves who'd led Silvercrest through peace and war. None of them were Omegas. Sherry straightened her spine and walked in. The council sat around the table, Nelda Robertson and 2 other elders, along with Fernando Haas, representing the warriors, and Roseanne Day, representing the healers. Guy stood near the window, his back to the room, but he turned when she entered. "Sherry," Nelda said, "we didn't expect you until sunset." "I've made my decision." Sherry moved to stand at the head of the table, the place traditionally reserved for the Luna during council meetings. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone in the room. "I'll accept the Luna position." The relief on Roseanne's face was immediate. Fernando looked surprised, but not displeased. The elders exchanged glances, their expressions harder to read. "You understand what you're accepting?" Nelda asked. The responsibility, the scrutiny, the challenges that come with leading alongside the alpha? I understand that 3 packs have fallen to a threat we don't comprehend, and a 4th is under siege. I understand that Silvercrest needs leadership that can see clearly and judge fairly when that threat arrives at our borders. And I understand, Sherry's gaze moved to Guy, that I passed a trial specifically designed to test for those qualities. So yes, I accept Luna, not because I've forgiven past hurts or because I trust easily, but because the pack needs someone who can make the hard calls, and the trial proved I can do that. Even working alongside Alpha Knight? Nelda pressed. Given your history, especially given our history, we've both made mistakes, we've both caused pain, but we've also both learned from it. Sherry kept her voice steady. Guy learned that prophecies can fail, and that making choices for others without their input destroys more than it saves. I learned that being rejected doesn't equal being worthless. Those are hard lessons, painful ones, but they're the kind that make you better at seeing truth. Guy's expression was unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes. Pride? Gratitude? Maybe just relief that she wasn't walking away. Then it's settled, Nelda said. Sherry Brennan, by right of trial and council approval. You are officially Luna-elect of Silvercrest Pack. The formal ceremony will be held in 3 days at the full moon. About that, Sherry said, I'd like to move the ceremony up to tomorrow night. The room went silent. That's highly irregular, one of the other elders protested. These ceremonies require preparation, ritual, proper observance. We don't have time for proper observance. Sherry leaned forward, hands on the table. You said the 4th pack won't last the week. That means the northern threat could reach our borders within days. I need to be fully instated as Luna before that happens, with all the authority and rights the position carries. Waiting 3 days for tradition's sake is a luxury we can't afford. Fernando grunted approval. The girl's right. If we're under siege during a leadership transition, it weakens our position. Better to have the Luna instated and functioning before crisis hits. It's not just tradition, Nelda argued. The full moon ceremony channels the moon goddess's blessing. Without it, I'm still the wolf who passed the trial. Sherry's voice turned hard. The goddess chose me as Guy's mate originally. Then circumstances and prophecies and fear got in the way. If she wants to bless this Luna ceremony, she will, moon phase or not. But I'm not risking this pack's safety for symbolism. Roseanne smiled slightly. She really does sound like a Luna. Tomorrow night, Guy said from the window, his first words since Sherry entered the room. I agree with the Luna-elect. We ceremony tomorrow night, under whatever moon we have. The pack needs stable leadership, and we need it now. When the Alpha and Luna-elect agreed, the council had little choice. Nelda sighed. Tomorrow night, then. But this will raise questions with the other territories. Let them question, Sherry said. They'll have bigger concerns soon enough. The meeting adjourned. Council members filed out, already discussing ceremony arrangements and how to condense 3 days of preparation into 1. Guy lingered near the window, and Sherry found herself alone with him again. Thank you, he said quietly, for staying, for accepting Luna. Don't thank me yet. You might regret this partnership when I start actually making decisions. But there was no real bite in her words. I doubt that. Guy turned to face her. You were right yesterday. We don't have trust yet. But we have something almost as valuable. We have honest assessment of each other's flaws. I know exactly where I failed you. You know exactly why. There's no illusions between us, no pretending. That's a strange foundation for a partnership, but it might be stronger than you think. Or it might shatter the first time we disagree about something important. Then we'll deal with that when it happens. He moved closer, stopped at a respectful distance. The ceremony tomorrow. You'll need pack regalia. Luna ceremonial dress. Have you... I have nothing like that. I was never supposed to be Luna, remember? Right, of course. Guy looked uncomfortable. There are traditional dresses in storage, worn by past Lunas. Roseanne can help you choose something. Make alterations if needed. The thought of wearing another Luna's dress, standing in a dead she-wolf's shoes, literally, made Sherry's stomach clench. But practicality won out. Fine, I'll coordinate with Roseanne. And after the ceremony, we need to discuss the northern threat. Really discuss it. I'll give you all the intelligence we have, all the survivor reports, everything. Fresh eyes might catch something we've missed. You think I'll see something your warriors and scouts haven't? I think you see things others miss. The trial proved that. Guy's expression turned grim. We need every advantage we can get, Sherry. Whatever's coming, it's worse than rogues, worse than territorial disputes. The survivors who made it out, the few who could speak, they talked about darkness that moves like living smoke. About wolves who vanished screaming, about territory that turns dead and poisoned after it passes through. A chill ran down Sherry's spine. That sounds like old magic, the kind from before the packs organized. That's what scares me. We're equipped to fight rogues, rival packs, even natural disasters. But ancient magic? Dark creatures from the time before civilization? We don't have protocols for that. We don't even have reliable information. Then we'll figure it out together. The words came out before Sherry could stop them. That's what Luna and Alpha do, right? Face the impossible side by side. Something shifted in Guy's expression. Hope, maybe, or just relief that she was committed to actually trying. Tomorrow night, then. After the ceremony, we plan for war. After the ceremony, we plan for survival, Sherry corrected. War implies we understand what we're fighting. Roseanne found Sherry in the archives an hour later, already back at her usual work. The healer carried a large garment bag and wore an expression of determination. Luna-elect, Roseanne said warmly, we need to find you a ceremonial dress. Just Sherry, please. I won't be officially Luna until tomorrow. But you will be Luna tomorrow, which means today we prepare. Roseanne set down the garment bag with care. I brought 3 options from storage. All from past Lunas, all traditional style, but different enough that you might find one that feels right. She pulled out the first dress, deep blue silk with silver embroidery, elegant and formal. Beautiful, but incredibly impractical. The second was similar, cream-colored with gold accents. The third... Sherry's breath caught. The third dress was simpler. Forest green with minimal embellishment, designed for movement rather than show. It looked like something a wolf could actually function in, not just pose in for ceremonies. That one, she said. The green one. Roseanne smiled. I thought you might choose that. It belonged to Luna Edith, about 80 years ago. She was a practical Luna, more interested in getting things done than looking impressive. The pack loved her for it. Was she... Sherry hesitated. Was she Omega? No, Beta rank. But she came from a small pack, had no fancy bloodline or political connections. Some wolves questioned her worthiness at first, too. Roseanne held up the dress. Try it on. Let's see what alterations we need. The dress fit surprisingly well, needing only minor adjustments at the waist and hem. Sherry stood before the mirror in Roseanne's workroom and barely recognized herself. She looked like a Luna, or at least like someone trying very hard to become one. You wear it well, Roseanne said, pinning the hem. Better than Cecilia Wagner would have. That one wanted diamonds and gold, wanted everyone to see her rank from across the territory. Is that why she failed the trial? Partly. She couldn't see past appearances to truth, kept judging the visions based on who looked strongest, who held highest rank. Roseanne glanced up. You judged based on character, on what actually mattered. That's rare, Sherry, especially in someone young. I'm not that young. 26 isn't. You're young for Luna. Most don't take the position until their 30s at least. You'll face wolves who think your age makes you unqualified. Roseanne finished pinning, sat back. But age and wisdom aren't the same thing. You've learned more in your year of rejection than most wolves learn in a decade of comfort. Sherry studied her reflection. Did you know? About the prophecy? About why Guy rejected me? Roseanne's hands stilled. I knew there were elders pressuring the Alpha. Didn't know the specifics until recently. I'm sorry, Sherry. If I'd known, if any of us had known the real reason, what would you have done? Contradicted the elders? Questioned the Alpha's decision? Sherry shook her head. The pack hierarchy doesn't work that way. Omegas and healers don't override Alphas and council members. Maybe they should sometimes. Roseanne stood, met Sherry's eyes in the mirror. You're going to change things, aren't you? As Luna. You're going to challenge the way we've always done things. I'm going to try to keep the pack alive, Sherry said. If that means challenging tradition, so be it. Good, Roseanne smiled. We need a Luna who'll shake things up. The old ways clearly aren't working, not if prophecies fail and threats we can't identify are destroying packs. They finished the alterations in comfortable silence. When Sherry finally changed back into her regular clothes, Roseanne packed the dress carefully. Tomorrow night, the healer said. You'll stand before the pack and accept Luna formally. It's a powerful ceremony, Sherry. You'll feel the pack bond snap into place, connecting you to every wolf in Silvercrest. It can be overwhelming. More overwhelming than mate bond rejection? Different kind of overwhelming. The mate bond is one connection, intense and focused. Pack bonds are hundreds of connections, all at once. You'll feel their loyalty, their doubts, their hopes, their fear about what's coming from the north. Roseanne squeezed Sherry's hand. But you'll also feel their strength, and they'll feel yours. After Roseanne left, Sherry returned to the archives. She had work to finish before tomorrow's ceremony, and somehow the familiar routine of organizing records helped calm her racing mind. She was cataloging a box of century-old correspondence when she found it. A letter, yellowed with age, written in elegant script. The signature at the bottom made her breath catch. Luna Edith Silvercrest, the practical Luna whose dress Sherry would wear tomorrow. The letter was addressed to someone named Christopher, and the content was unexpected. My dear brother, you ask if I regret accepting Luna after everything the pack said about my unsuitability. You ask if I wish I'd married that Eastern Alpha who promised you an easier life, a higher position, a future without struggle. The answer is no. Yes, the pack doubted me. Yes, I faced wolves who thought beta rank wasn't good enough for Luna, who whispered that Alpha Martin only chose me because the proper candidates refused him. Yes, every day brought challenges that made me question my own competence. But here's what they didn't understand. Being Luna isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing to see clearly even when the truth is uncomfortable. It's about choosing the pack's needs over your own comfort. It's about standing beside your Alpha and making the hard calls that no one else wants to make. I'm good at this, Christopher, not because I'm strong or dominant or politically connected, but because I care more about getting it right than looking right. Because I'd rather make the unpopular choice that saves lives than the easy choice that wins approval. The pack is starting to see that. Starting to trust that their odd little beta-ranked Luna actually knows what she's doing. And that's worth more than any amount of early acceptance or easy approval. Tell Mother I'm happy. Tell Father I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. And tell yourself that sometimes the unsuitable choice turns out to be the only suitable one. With love, Edith. Sherry read the letter 3 times, her hands trembling. It was like Luna Edith had written directly to her across 80 years, had known exactly what Sherry needed to hear on the night before her ceremony. Being Luna isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing to see clearly. She carefully refolded the letter, placed it back in the box. But she committed those words to memory, held them close like armor against tomorrow's uncertainties. Luna Edith had been doubted too. Had been considered unsuitable, had faced a pack that questioned her worthiness, and she'd proven them wrong by being exactly who she was, practical, clear-sighted, and more interested in getting things done than in looking impressive. Sherry could do that. She could be that kind of Luna. The question was whether clear sight and practical determination would be enough to face whatever darkness was moving south toward Silvercrest. She'd find out soon enough. That night, Sherry dreamed. She stood in a forest she didn't recognize, but wrong. The trees were twisted, their bark black and weeping something that looked like oil. The ground beneath her feet felt dead. No grass, no undergrowth, just gray ash that stirred with each step. And in the distance, moving between the corrupted trees, something vast and dark and ancient. It had no clear form. Sometimes it looked like smoke, sometimes like shadow, sometimes like a creature too terrible to fully comprehend. But she felt its attention turn toward her, felt it notice her presence in this dead forest. A voice spoke, old as mountains and cold as winter's heart. Little Luna, little broken wolf who thinks she can stand against the inevitable. The packs will fall, the territories will burn, and you will watch everything you try to save turn to ash. Sherry tried to speak, tried to move, but the dream held her frozen. The darkness moved closer, and with it came the smell of death and decay and something older than either. You passed a trial meant for judging fairness and mercy, but what's coming doesn't care about fairness, doesn't understand mercy. Your clear sight means nothing when the darkness swallows everything. The thing was close now, close enough that Sherry could feel the cold radiating from it. Close enough to see that where it moved, the forest died. Trees withered. Ground turned to poison. Life itself fled from its presence. Run while you can, little Luna. Run far and fast. Perhaps you'll survive a few more weeks before the inevitable comes. Sherry woke gasping, her heart racing, her skin cold with sweat. Just a dream, just a nightmare brought on by stress and Guy's warnings about the northern threat. But it had felt real. Had felt like the darkness itself had reached out across the distance to warn her, to tell her that clear sight and good judgment wouldn't be enough. She didn't sleep again that night. Dawn came, and with it the day of her Luna ceremony, the day she would formally accept responsibility for a pack threatened by something that had spoken to her in dreams. Sherry dressed in simple clothes, ate a small breakfast she could barely taste, and tried not to think about twisted trees and ancient voices. Tonight, she would become Luna. Tomorrow, she would start learning how to fight darkness, if they had that long. Chapter 5. The Luna Ceremony. The pack gathered at sunset. Sherry stood in Roseanne's workroom, staring at her reflection in Luna Edith's green dress. The alterations fit perfectly. The hem fell just above her ankles, allowing movement, and the waist cinched without restricting breath. Practical, functional, exactly what she needed. But her hands still shook as she fastened the simple silver clasp at her throat. "Nervous?" Roseanne asked, adjusting the dress's shoulders one final time. "Terrified," Sherry admitted. "What if they reject me? What if the pack refuses to accept an Omega Luna?" "Then they reject you. But I don't think they will." Roseanne turned Sherry to face the mirror again. "Look at yourself. Really look. What do you see?" Sherry studied her reflection. She saw a plain Omega in a borrowed dress, trying to be something she'd never been trained for, saw the fear in her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, saw someone who didn't belong in Luna regalia. "I see someone pretending," she whispered. "Then you're looking wrong." Roseanne stood beside her, their reflections side by side. "I see a wolf who passed an impossible trial, who chose to stay when she could have run, who's willing to face darkness for a pack that hurt her. That's not pretending, Sherry. That's courage." A knock on the door interrupted them. Beta Van's voice called through. "It's time." Sherry took one last breath, straightened her spine, and followed Van through the packhouse corridors. They emerged onto the main balcony that overlooked the ceremonial grounds, a natural amphitheater where the pack gathered for important events. The sight stole her breath. Hundreds of wolves filled the space. Every pack member who could attend had come, warriors in formal dress, families with children, elders in ceremonial robes. Torches ringed the grounds, casting dancing light across the crowd. And at the center, on a raised platform of ancient stone, Alpha Guy Knight waited. He wore traditional Alpha regalia, Black leather marked with silver clan symbols, his dark hair tied back, his expression solemn. When he saw Sherry emerge onto the balcony, something flickered across his face. Approval? Relief? She couldn't tell from this distance. Van led her down the stairs, through the crowd. Wolves parted to let them pass, their eyes tracking every step. Sherry heard whispers, felt the weight of their judgment. Some faces showed curiosity, others skepticism. A few, like Teresa, standing near the front, showed open support. But most just watched, waiting to see if the rejected Omega could actually pull this off. They reached the platform. Van stepped back, leaving Sherry alone with Guy beneath the rising moon. It wasn't full yet, wouldn't be for 2 more days, but it cast enough light to see by. Guy's voice carried across the grounds, amplified by alpha power. We gather tonight to witness the installation of a new Luna. The trial has been passed. The council has approved. The old ways have been honored. He turned to Sherry, held out his hand. She took it, and the touch sent a jolt through her. Not the mate bond that was gone forever, but pack magic, recognizing the connection between Alpha and Luna Elect. Sherry Brennan, Guy said, his gray eyes locked on hers. You passed the chamber of truth. You saw clearly when others saw only their own assumptions. You judged fairly when others judged with prejudice. You chose mercy and justice in balance when others chose one over the other. The crowd murmured. Not everyone knew the trial details, but they were hearing them now. By right of trial and by pack law, you have earned the position of Luna. Guy's grip on her hand tightened. But earning and accepting are different things. Do you, Sherry Brennan, accept the responsibility of Luna? Do you swear to lead this pack alongside the Alpha, to protect our wolves, to make the hard choices that leadership demands? This was it, the moment of commitment. After this, there was no backing out, no changing her mind, no returning to her quiet life in the archives. Sherry looked out at the gathered pack, saw warriors who doubted her, saw Omegas who hoped she'd prove them wrong, saw children who didn't care about rank, only whether their Luna would keep them safe, saw Teresa's encouraging smile, saw Roseanne's confident nod. And she thought about Luna Edith's letter, about being willing to see clearly even when uncomfortable, about choosing the pack's needs over personal comfort. I accept, Sherry said, her voice carrying across the grounds. I swear to lead this pack, to protect our wolves, to make the hard choices. I swear to see clearly, to judge fairly, to choose mercy and justice in balance. I accept Luna. Power surged through the connection between her hand and Guy's. The pack bond snapped into place all at once, hundreds of threads connecting her consciousness to every wolf in Silvercrest. The sensation was overwhelming, exactly as Roseanne had warned. Sherry felt their emotions flooding through her. Doubt from Fernando Haas, hope from Teresa, curiosity from dozens of pack members she barely knew. And underneath it all, a current of fear. Fear of the northern threat, fear of the unknown, fear that their new Omega Luna wouldn't be enough. She felt Guy's steady presence through the Alpha-Luna connection, felt him anchor her as the pack bonds settled into place. His emotions were complex, relief that she'd accepted, guilt that still lingered from the rejection, determination to make this partnership work, and something else she couldn't quite name. Let the pack witness, Guy said, releasing her hand. Sherry Brennan is Luna of Silvercrest. Her word carries authority. Her judgment carries weight. Her bond with every member of this pack is sealed. Roseanne stepped onto the platform carrying a silver circlet. Simple, elegant, practical. Not a crown, just a symbol. She placed it on Sherry's head, and the pack bonds resonated with acceptance. Luna Sherry, Roseanne said formally, then smiled. Welcome to impossible responsibility and constant headaches. The pack erupted. Not in cheers exactly, but in acknowledgement. Howls rose from the crowd as wolves shifted to honor their new Luna in the traditional way. Even those who doubted her howled. Pack law demanded it, and the bonds compelled respect even if personal feelings didn't. Sherry's wolf rose inside her, responding to the howls with her own, small and gray and unremarkable, but Luna nonetheless. The sound that came from her throat carried power she'd never felt before, pack magic amplifying her voice until it echoed across the territory. When the howls finally faded, Guy spoke again. "The ceremony is complete. Luna Sherry stands recognized. Let any who question her authority challenge me directly." It was a bold statement, a protection. Basically, Guy was saying that doubting Sherry's fitness for Luna meant doubting his judgment as alpha, and no one challenged an alpha lightly. The crowd began to disperse, though many lingered to speak with pack members, to process what they'd just witnessed. Teresa pushed through the crowd to reach the platform, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she said, pulling Sherry into a hug. "You actually did it. Luna and Omega Luna." "Don't remind me," Sherry muttered, but she hugged back. Having one friend who genuinely celebrated felt like a lifeline. Fernando Haas approached next, his expression unreadable. He bowed, brief, correct, giving Luna her due respect. "I still have doubts," he said bluntly, "but you passed the trial. That counts for something. Prove me wrong, Luna." "I intend to," Sherry said. Other pack members came forward, some congratulating, some assessing, all testing the new dynamic. Sherry felt their emotions through the pack bonds, a constant low hum of thoughts and feelings that she'd need to learn to filter. When the crowd finally thinned, Guy touched her elbow. "We need to talk about the northern threat, tonight." "Now? The ceremony The fourth pack fell this afternoon." His voice was grim. "We got word an hour before the ceremony started. I didn't want to delay your installation."
"But Sherry, we're out of time. Whatever's coming, it'll be here within days. Maybe sooner." The dream flashed through Sherry's mind. Dead trees, poisoned ground, that ancient voice promising destruction. "Show me everything you have," she said. "Every report, every survivor account, every piece of intelligence. If I'm Luna now, I need to understand what we're facing." Guy's private office was different from the formal Alpha's office where the council met. This was a working space, maps covering every wall, reports stacked on the desk, a tactical board marked with territories and movement patterns. He cleared space for Sherry to sit, then pulled out a thick folder. "This is everything we know," which isn't much. Sherry opened the folder. The first document was a map of the Northern Territories, marked with red X's over fallen packs. 4 packs in 6 months, each one stronger than the last. The pattern of destruction moved steadily south, and Silvercrest lay directly in its path. "Survivor reports," Guy said, handing her another stack. "Read these. Tell me what you notice." Sherry read. The accounts were fragmentary, often incoherent, but certain details repeated across multiple reports. Darkness that moved like smoke, but solid enough to tear through warriors. The trees died where it passed, turned black and twisted. Couldn't shift. Something about it suppressed our wolves. Voices, old voices speaking words that hurt to hear. "My packmate just vanished. One moment there, next moment gone, like something pulled him into shadow. The Alpha tried to fight it. His claws passed right through. Then it touched him and he just stopped. Stopped moving, stopped breathing, stopped being..." Sherry set down the reports, her hands shaking. "This isn't natural. This isn't rogues or rival packs or anything we have protocols for." "No," Guy agreed. "Our best guess is ancient magic. Something from before the packs organized, before we learned to work together. Maybe something we thought was legend." "What legends specifically?" Guy moved to one of the maps, pointed to the far north. "There are old stories about the Waste, territory so far north that no pack claims it. The stories say it's where the first wolves came from before they learned to shift, before they became civilized, and that something dark lives there, something that predates pack law and moon goddess blessings. Something that was supposed to stay contained by ancient wards. You think the wards failed? I think something broke them, or maybe they just degraded over centuries. Either way, that darkness is moving south, destroying everything in its path." Guy's expression was bleak, "and we have no idea how to fight it." Sherry studied the map,
traced the pattern of fallen packs. 4 packs, 4 different territories, 4 different strengths and weaknesses, but all of them had fallen within weeks of the darkness arriving. "What did they try?" she asked. "The packs that fell, what tactics did they use?" "Direct combat. The first pack thought they could fight it like rogues, sent their warriors to meet it head-on. The warriors never came back." Guy pulled out another report. The second pack tried magic, brought in witches, spellcasters, anyone with supernatural knowledge. The magic didn't work, or worked too well. Some reports suggest the darkness absorbed the magical energy, got stronger from it. And the third pack? Tried to run, evacuated everyone south, hoping to outpace the threat. Guy's jaw clenched. It followed them, faster than they could travel, caught them 2 days into their flight, and there weren't many survivors from that one. The fourth pack that just fell? Barricaded themselves, reinforced their territory with every defense they had, physical barriers, magical wards, blessed territory lines. It didn't matter. The darkness came through their defenses like they were paper. Sherry set down the reports, her mind racing. 4 packs, 4 different approaches, all failures. "We can't fight it directly," she said slowly. "Can't run from it. Can't hide from it. Can't use magic against it. So what does that leave?" "I was hoping you'd see something I missed," Guy admitted. "Some pattern in the reports, some detail that might give us a direction." Sherry picked up the survivor accounts again, read them more carefully, looking not for what they said, but for what they didn't say, for gaps in the narrative, for details that seemed odd or out of place. One account caught her attention. "My daughter survived. Don't know how. She's only 8, barely past her first shift. But when the darkness came, when it took everyone else, it passed right over her, like she wasn't there, like she didn't matter enough to notice." Another account from a different pack. "Old Lyle made it out. He's 90 if he's a day, more wolf than man these days, barely coherent. But the darkness didn't take him. We found him after, wandering the ruins, confused but alive." And a third, the Omega who worked in the kitchens, she survived too, said she hid when the darkness came, just pressed herself against the wall and tried to be invisible. And somehow it worked. It took the warriors, took the Alpha, took everyone strong and important. But it left her... Sherry's breath caught. "Guy, look at these accounts. Really look at them." He moved to read over her shoulder, and she felt his confusion through their Alpha-Luna connection. "What am I looking at?" "Survivors. Children, the elderly, Omegas, the weakest members of each pack." Sherry's mind raced, connecting pieces. Everyone strong died, everyone powerful, everyone dominant, everyone who would have fought back. But the weak survived. That doesn't make sense. Why would darkness powerful enough to destroy Alpha's spare children? Because, Sherry's eyes widened, because it's not about physical strength. It's about power, dominance, authority. She stood, paced to the map. Think about it. Every pack that fell tried to fight with their strongest weapons. Warriors, magic users, Alphas themselves. And they all died. But the wolves who had no power, no authority, no ability to fight back, they survived. Guy's expression shifted as understanding dawned. The darkness feeds on power. Or it targets power specifically, like it's drawn to dominance, to authority, to strength. Sherry's heart pounded. That's why the third pack's evacuation failed. They ran as a pack, with their Alpha leading, with their structure intact. The darkness followed that power signature, but individual weak wolves, scattered and powerless, it ignored them. So our warriors are useless. Our strongest fighters are actually vulnerabilities. Guy ran a hand through his hair, looking shaken. Everything we thought would protect us makes us targets. Not useless, just, we have to think differently. Sherry stared at the map, at the pattern of destruction. We can't fight this with strength. We have to fight it with... She paused. What's the opposite of dominance?
Submission? Weakness? No, those are still reactions to power. They still acknowledge the hierarchy. Sherry's mind raced back to the trial, back to the visions that tested her judgment. The opposite of dominance is insignificance, being beneath notice.
Existing outside the power structure entirely. Guy's eyes widened. You think we need to make ourselves insignificant? I think we need to understand what makes someone insignificant to this darkness. Why did it spare the children and elderly? What made them invisible? Sherry picked up the survivor accounts again, reading more carefully. There has to be something, some quality they share beyond just being weak. They worked through the reports for hours, cross-referencing survivor accounts, looking for patterns. The pack bonds hummed in the background of Sherry's awareness. Hundreds of wolves settling into sleep, their emotions calming as night deepened. Around midnight, Sherry found it. Guy, listen to this account. She read aloud. My daughter survived. When I found her after, she was crying. Said she tried to fight when the darkness came, tried to shift and defend herself like she'd been taught, but she was too scared. Froze completely, couldn't move, couldn't even growl, just stopped. And the darkness passed over her like she wasn't there. Fear paralysis, Guy said. That's not unusual in children during attacks. But look at this other account. Sherry found the page. Old Lyle survived, but he's been in decline for years. His wolf barely responds anymore. When we found him, he was just existing. No fight in him, no resistance, like a tree or a stone, just there. And the Omega? Guy prompted. She said she tried to be invisible, but that's not quite right, is it? She didn't try to be invisible. She gave up, accepted that she couldn't fight, couldn't escape, couldn't do anything. She surrendered completely. Not to the darkness, but to her own powerlessness. Guy stared at her. You're saying the survivors all had one thing in common. They completely gave up fighting? More than that. They ceased to be threats, ceased to be participants in the struggle at all. The child was frozen in fear. The old wolf was too far gone to even understand danger. The Omega accepted total helplessness. Sherry's voice dropped to a whisper. They became nothing, and the darkness ignored nothing. That's... Guy struggled for words. That's insane. You're suggesting that to survive this threat, we need our entire pack to somehow give up? Become helpless? No, I'm suggesting that power itself is what attracts this darkness. Authority, dominance, the will to fight. Those are what it targets and consumes. Sherry met his eyes. We can't win by being strong, Guy. Every pack that tried that approach failed. We might win by understanding what it means to be beneath the darkness's notice. And how exactly do we do that? We're a pack. We have structure, hierarchy, alpha authority. That's not something we can just switch off. I don't know yet, Sherry admitted. But I know we can't fight this the way others did. We need a completely different approach. Something that goes against every instinct we have. Guy looked at the maps, at the reports, at the pattern of inevitable destruction moving toward their territory. How long do we have? Based on movement patterns, 3 days, maybe 4. Sherry's hand moved to the circlet on her head, the symbol of Luna authority she'd accepted only hours ago. We became Luna and Alpha at possibly the worst time in pack history, or exactly the right time. Guy's expression was grim but determined. A traditional Alpha-Luna pair would never consider what you're suggesting. They'd fight with everything they had, lead the pack into glorious battle, and die with honor. But us? We might be crazy enough to try the impossible. Exactly. Guy moved to the door. It's late. You should rest. Tomorrow we start planning, really planning. Not for how to fight this darkness, but for how to survive it. Sherry stood, exhaustion pulling at her. The ceremony, the pack bonds settling into place, hours of research. It was all catching up with her. But as she moved toward the door, Guy caught her arm. Sherry, thank you. For seeing what I couldn't. For thinking differently. For being exactly the kind of Luna this pack needs.
She met his eyes, saw genuine gratitude there. Not romance, that was dead, killed by rejection and time, but partnership, respect. The beginning of something that might eventually become trust. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "We still have to figure out how to make an entire pack give up power without falling apart. That's going to be complicated." Everything worth doing is complicated. Sherry left the pack house and walked through the quiet territory toward her cottage. The same cottage she'd lived in for a year as a rejected Omega. But everything felt different now. The pack bonds connected her to every sleeping wolf, made her aware of the territory in a way she'd never experienced before. She felt their fear, their hope, their uncertainty about their new Omega Luna. And underneath it all, like a distant drumbeat, the approaching darkness. Not close yet, but coming. Inevitable as winter, cold as death. 3 days, maybe 4. Sherry had that long to figure out how to save a pack by teaching them to become nothing. It would either be brilliant or insane, possibly both. Chapter 6, The Council of Doubt. Sherry woke to pounding on her door. Dawn had barely broken, pale light filtering through her cottage windows. She'd only slept for a few hours, her dreams filled with twisted trees and that ancient voice promising destruction. The pack bonds hummed with morning activity, wolves waking, beginning their daily routines, unaware that they had perhaps 3 days left before darkness arrived. The pounding continued. "Luna Sherry! Council meeting! Now!" She recognized Fernando Haas's voice. Sherry dressed quickly, splashed water on her face, and opened the door. The head warrior stood there, his expression grim. "What happened?" she asked. "The council wants to discuss defense strategies. They've been meeting since before dawn." Fernando's jaw tightened. "And they're not happy about your theory that we should make ourselves powerless." "Guy told them?" "The Alpha presented your findings to the council an hour ago. Elder Robertson called for an emergency session." Fernando stepped back as Sherry emerged. "Fair warning, Luna, they think you're insane, and they're not being subtle about it." Perfect. Less than 12 hours as Luna, and she was already facing council opposition. Sherry followed Fernando through the early morning territory. A few pack members were out, and they stopped to watch their new Luna pass. She felt their curiosity through the pack bonds, mixed with uncertainty. The council chamber was tense when she entered. All 3 elders sat at the table, along with Roseanne, Guy, and Beta Van. Maps covered the surface, marked with defensive positions and evacuation routes. "Luna Sherry." Elder Nelda's voice was cold. "How kind of you to join us." "I came as soon as Fernando informed me." Sherry moved to the empty seat beside Guy, felt him steady her through their Alpha-Luna connection. He was calm, but there was frustration underneath. The meeting hadn't gone well so far. "The Alpha has presented your theory about the northern threat," Nelda continued, "that it targets power and dominance specifically, that survivors were those who, what was your phrase, gave up fighting entirely?" "That's a simplification, but essentially yes." Sherry met the elder's gaze. The evidence suggests you've read survivor accounts and drawn wildly speculative conclusions." Another elder, a male named Patrick Yang, leaned forward. "You're proposing we abandon every defensive strategy we have, that we teach our pack to become helpless. Do you understand how absurd that sounds?" "I understand it goes against instinct," Sherry said carefully, "but every pack that fought traditionally failed. All of them. We need to consider alternatives." "Alternatives based on what? Fear-paralyzed children and senile elders surviving by accident?" Patrick's voice rose. "You want to build strategy around coincidence and luck?" "I want to build strategy around the only evidence of survival we have." Sherry pulled out the reports she'd marked last night. 16 confirmed survivors across 4 fallen packs. All of them share the same quality. They ceased to be active participants in the conflict, not through strategy, but through complete surrender to powerlessness. "And you think we can teach 300 wolves to do that deliberately?" Nelda shook her head. "It's impossible. Warriors don't surrender.
Alphas don't submit. Pack structure depends on authority and dominance. What you're suggesting would destroy us from within before the darkness even arrives. Guy spoke up. With respect, Elder, we're talking about survival, not honor. If giving up power temporarily means our pack lives, isn't that worth considering? Temporarily? Fernando laughed without humor. Alpha, once you teach wolves to be powerless, how exactly do you restore authority afterward? Once pack structure collapses, how do you rebuild it? We'd figure it out. You'd figure it out? Patrick stood, his hands flat on the table. You've been Alpha for 3 years, Knight. Your Luna has been installed for less than a day, and you want us to trust that you can dismantle and rebuild pack hierarchy on speculation? The room fell into tense silence. Sherry felt the doubt radiating from the council members, felt their fear that their new leadership was making a catastrophic mistake. Roseanne spoke quietly. What if Luna Sherry is right? What if this darkness does target power? Can we afford to ignore that possibility? Can we afford to act on it? Nelda countered. If we're wrong, if we've dismantled our defenses based on faulty interpretation, we'll be utterly helpless when the darkness arrives. At least fighting gives us a chance. Fighting gives us the same chance the other 4 packs had, Sherry said, which is to say none. Their warriors died. Their alphas died. Their magic users died. Everyone strong enough to pose a threat was consumed. Only the powerless survived. So you keep saying, Patrick's eyes narrowed, but you're asking us to bet 300 lives on your interpretation of fragmentary reports from traumatized survivors. That's not strategy, Luna. That's gambling with our existence. Van, who'd been silent until now, cleared his throat. There might be a middle ground. Everyone turned to look at the beta. We can't completely abandon defense, Van continued, but we could test Luna Sherry's theory on a small scale. Send out scouts, not warriors, but omegas or lower-ranked wolves. See if they can approach the darkness and return. If the theory holds, they'll be ignored. If not, he paused. If not, we'll know before committing the entire pack to that strategy. You want to send omegas as test subjects? Nelda looked horrified. I want to test the theory before we stake everything on it, Van corrected. And if Luna Sherry is right, omegas have the best chance of surviving such a test. Sherry's stomach churned. The logic was sound, but the idea of deliberately sending wolves toward that darkness, even to test a theory, felt wrong. Still, Van was offering a compromise the council might accept. How would we even do this? Fernando asked. The darkness is still 2 or 3 days out. We can't send scouts that far north without proper supplies and protection. We could if they traveled light and fast, Van said. A small group, maybe 3 or 4 wolves. Omegas who volunteer, who understand the risk. They observe from a distance, see how the darkness reacts to their presence, return with intelligence. And if they don't return? Roseanne asked quietly. Then we know the theory is wrong, and we prepare to fight traditionally. Van's expression was grave. It's a risk, but it's a smaller risk than committing the entire pack without testing first. Guy looked at Sherry. Your call, Luna. You developed the theory. Do you think it's testable this way? Sherry's mind raced. The theory was based on survivors who'd given up fighting instinctively, not deliberately. Could that be replicated? Could omegas consciously make themselves insignificant enough to be ignored? And could she live with herself if she sent wolves toward that darkness and they didn't return? But if she didn't test the theory, if the council refused to consider it, the pack would fight traditionally. And tradition had a 100% failure rate against this threat. Yes, she said finally, it's testable, but I have conditions. Of course you do, Patrick muttered. Sherry ignored him. First, only volunteers. No one gets ordered into this. Second, I go with them. Absolutely not, Guy said immediately. You're the Luna, Nelda added. You can't risk yourself on. I developed the theory. I'm asking others to test it. I go with them. Sherry's voice was firm. If I'm wrong, if this gets wolves killed, I need to face that consequence directly, not sit safely at home while others die for my mistake.
Guy grabbed her arm. Sherry, no. The pack needs you here, needs stable leadership. The pack needs to know their Luna doesn't hide behind others, that she's willing to face the same risks she asks of them. Sherry met his eyes. This isn't negotiable, Guy. If we test the theory, I'm part of the test group. She felt his frustration through their connection, his desperate desire to protect her, warring with his understanding that she was right. A Luna who sent others into danger while staying safe would lose the pack's trust immediately. Then I'm coming too, Guy said. Even worse idea, Fernando protested. We can't risk both Alpha and Luna on... If Luna Sherry's theory is correct, I'm one of the worst liabilities this pack has. Guy's voice was hard. My Alpha power makes me a beacon for that darkness. Better to know how it reacts to me now in a controlled test than when it arrives at our borders and I'm trying to organize defense. The council looked at each other, clearly unhappy with this turn. But the logic was inescapable. If power attracted the darkness, the Alpha was the biggest target. Understanding how it reacted to him could be crucial. This is madness, Nelda said finally. Our Alpha and Luna, less than a day after installation, volunteering to approach an entity that's destroyed 4 packs. How exactly is this responsible leadership? Responsible leadership means facing the threat directly, Sherry said, not asking others to do what we won't. Responsible leadership means surviving long enough to actually lead, Patrick countered. If both of you die testing this theory, who leads the pack when the darkness arrives? Beta Van, Guy said immediately. If we don't return, Van takes Alpha authority. Fernando commands the warriors. Roseanne coordinates healers and evacuation if needed. The succession is clear. Van looked uncomfortable, but nodded. I accept that responsibility, though I'd rather not need it. We won't need it, Sherry said with more confidence than she felt. If the theory is correct, the darkness will ignore us, will observe, gather intelligence, and return safely. And if the theory is wrong, Nelda pressed, then at least we'll know before committing the entire pack to it. Sherry stood, decision made. We leave at midday. That gives us time to assemble supplies, brief the volunteers, and reach the darkness's current position by nightfall. This is happening too fast, Patrick protested. We need more time to consider alternatives to... We don't have time. Guy cut him off. The darkness moves south every day. If we wait, it'll be on our doorstep before we've decided anything. At least this way, we get intelligence that might save lives. The council knew they were beaten. The Alpha and Luna had made their decision, were willing to risk themselves testing it, and had established clear succession if things went wrong. Arguing further would just waste the time they didn't have. Fine, Nelda said coldly. But this goes on record as the council's official objection. If this gamble costs the pack its leadership, the responsibility lies with you both. Noted, Sherry said. Anything else? Silence. The council had nothing left to say that wouldn't sound like cowardice compared to the Alpha and Luna's willingness to risk themselves. Then we're done here. Guy stood. Van, Fernando, help me identify volunteers. Roseanne, prepare medical supplies for the scouts. Elders, start preparing contingency plans in case we don't return. The meeting broke up. Council members filing out with expressions ranging from anger to fear. Sherry felt their emotions through the pack bonds, doubt that their new Luna knew what she was doing, fear that they'd lose leadership before it was properly established, frustration that 2 newly installed leaders were being so reckless. She couldn't blame them. If she were in their position, she'd think this was insane too. When the room cleared, Guy turned to her. You didn't have to volunteer for this. We could have sent others. And lost their trust immediately? No, this is the right call. Sherry moved to the windows overlooking the territory. Besides, I need to see it for myself. The darkness. I need to understand what we're facing. You saw the reports? Reports aren't the same as witnessing. She thought about her dream, about that ancient voice promising destruction. There's something about this threat that the reports aren't capturing, something the survivors couldn't articulate because they were too traumatized. Or something that can't be articulated, Guy said quietly. The old legends about the waste, they say the darkness that lives there predates language, that it's too ancient, too alien to be fully comprehended by modern minds.
Then we'll comprehend what we can and work with that. Sherry turned from the window. Who do we ask to volunteer? We need omegas, but I won't order anyone into this. Teresa will volunteer if you ask, Guy said. She'd follow you anywhere. That's exactly why I won't ask her. This can't be about loyalty to me personally. It needs to be wolves who understand the risk and choose it anyway. Then we announce it to the pack, explain the theory, explain what we're testing, and see who steps forward. Guy moved toward the door. Come on. If we're doing this, let's do it right. An hour later, the pack gathered in the main square. Not everyone. Some wolves were on duty, watching the borders, maintaining essential functions, but enough to spread word quickly through the pack bonds. Sherry stood on the pack house steps with Guy, feeling 300 pairs of eyes focused on them. Her Luna circlet felt heavy on her head, a constant reminder of authority she'd held for less than a day. Guy spoke first, his alpha voice carrying across the crowd. We've called you here to discuss the northern threat, and to ask for volunteers for a scouting mission. Murmurs rippled through the gathered wolves. Scouting missions weren't unusual, but the alpha's tone suggested this one was different. Your Luna has developed a theory about how the darkness operates, Guy continued. Based on survivor accounts, she believes it targets power and dominance specifically, that the only wolves who survived the fallen packs were those who posed no threat, who had no authority, who were powerless. The murmurs grew louder, confusion, disbelief, fear. Sherry stepped forward. I know it sounds impossible, but the evidence supports it. Every warrior who fought the darkness died, every alpha died, every magic user died, but children survived, the elderly survived, omegas survived. The pattern is clear. Power attracts this threat. Powerlessness makes you invisible to it. So what? Someone called from the crowd. We're supposed to just give up? Let it kill us without fighting? No, we're supposed to understand what we're facing before we decide how to respond. Sherry kept her voice steady. 4 packs tried fighting, 4 packs failed. We need intelligence before we commit to any strategy. What kind of intelligence? Teresa asked from the front of the crowd. We're sending a small group north to observe the darkness, not to engage it, just to see how it reacts to different types of wolves. Sherry took a breath. We need volunteers, preferably omegas or lower-ranked wolves, since the theory suggests you'll be safer. But anyone who volunteers needs to understand the risk. This is dangerous, possibly fatal. We're asking you to approach something that's destroyed 4 packs. Silence fell over the square. Asking for volunteers to face certain death wasn't common. Asking for Omega volunteers was even more unusual. Traditionally, Omegas stayed safe while warriors took risks. I'll go. Teresa stepped forward without hesitation. If Luna Sherry needs Omegas, I volunteer. Teresa, no, Sherry started. You're going, aren't you? Teresa cut her off. You and the Alpha both. If you're willing to risk yourselves testing this theory, I'm willing to risk myself supporting it. Another voice from the crowd. I'll volunteer too. A young male Omega Sherry, vaguely recognized from the kitchens. Name's Christopher Clifford. I'm nobody important, no power to speak of. If that makes me safer around this thing, I should go. And me. An older she-wolf, her muzzle graying. Nelda's already writing me off as useless. Might as well prove I've got one more mission in me. More volunteers stepped forward. Not many. Most of the pack looked uncomfortable with the entire concept. But enough. By the time they finished, 6 wolves had volunteered. 3 Omegas, including Teresa and Christopher, 2 older wolves past their warrior prime, and surprisingly, 1 young beta-ranked female named Edna Graham. I know the theory says low rank is safer, Edna said when Guy questioned her. But you need at least 1 mid-rank wolf to see how the darkness reacts to partial power. Otherwise, you're only testing the extremes. She had a point. Guy nodded approval. 8 of us then, Sherry said. The Alpha, myself, and 6 volunteers. We leave at midday, travel light and fast. Reach the darkness's current position by nightfall. We observe, we gather intelligence, we return by dawn tomorrow. And if the darkness doesn't ignore us? Someone asked from the crowd. If the theory is wrong? Sherry met their eyes. Then we die, and you fight traditionally. But at least you'll know that path was tested. At least you won't wonder if there was a better way. It wasn't a comforting answer, but it was honest. The crowd dispersed slowly, wolves breaking into small groups to discuss what they'd heard. Sherry felt their emotions through the pack bonds: fear, doubt, reluctant respect for leaders willing to risk themselves, and underneath it all, desperate hope that somehow this crazy plan might work. Teresa approached as the square cleared. You tried to tell me no. Because you're volunteering out of loyalty to me, not belief in the theory. Can it be both? Teresa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I believe you're right, Sherry. And I believe you need friends watching your back when you test it. So I'm coming, and you can't stop me. Sherry pulled her into a hug. Just stay close to me out there. If anything goes wrong, we die together. I can live with that. Teresa pulled back. Or not live with it, technically, but you know what I mean. The gallows humor helped. Sherry managed a weak laugh. Midday, Guy called to the volunteers. Meet at the northern gate. Light packs only, water, basic supplies, nothing that slows us down. We're scouting, not fighting. The volunteers dispersed to prepare. Sherry headed back to her cottage to pack, but Guy caught her arm. This is really happening, he said quietly. We're really doing this. Too late to back out now. Sherry tried for confidence she didn't feel. I could order you to stay behind, pull rank as Alpha. And I could refuse as Luna. We'd waste valuable time arguing about it. She met his eyes. We're partners now, Guy. That means we face threats together, not hiding behind each other. I know. Doesn't mean I have to like it. He released her arm. Be ready at midday. And Sherry, if anything goes wrong out there, it won't. But if it does, if the darkness targets us specifically, if the theory is wrong, run. Don't try to be heroic. Don't try to save anyone else. Just run and get back here to warn the pack. The same applies to you. Guy smiled grimly. I'm the Alpha. Heroic stupidity is part of the job description. Lucky for you, I'm the Luna. Common sense is part of mine. Sherry started walking away, then stopped. Guy, thank you for backing the theory even though the council thinks it's insane, for being willing to test it personally instead of sending others. Thank me if we survive it, Guy said. And Sherry, I'm starting to think that rejecting you might have been the biggest mistake of my life. Not because of the mate bond, that's gone. I accept that. But because you see things clearly, think differently, challenge assumptions. The pack needs that. I need that. It wasn't a declaration of love, wasn't even really an apology, but it was honest acknowledgement from a male who'd hurt her deeper than anyone else. One step at a time, Sherry said. First we survive the darkness, then we figure out if we can rebuild trust. Deal? Deal. Sherry walked back to her cottage, the morning sun warm on her face. In a few hours, she'd be heading north toward an entity that had destroyed 4 packs, testing a theory that might be brilliantly insightful or catastrophically wrong. She packed quickly: water, dried meat, a warm cloak for night travel. The practical dress from yesterday, not Luna regalia. This wasn't about looking impressive. This was about survival. At midday, 8 wolves gathered at the northern gate, and the journey toward darkness began. Chapter 7. Into the Deadlands. They traveled in silence for the first hour. 8 wolves moving through Silvercrest territory, heading north towards something that shouldn't exist. Sherry ran in her wolf form, small and gray, unremarkable beside the others. Guy's black wolf led the group, his alpha presence a constant warmth through their connection. Teresa ran beside Sherry, her rust-colored fur bright in the afternoon sun. The volunteers spread out in loose formation. Christopher Clifford, the young kitchen Omega, ran with nervous energy. The
The two older wolves, a male named Lyle Harrington and a female named Roseanne Day's sister, Mitzi Sharp, conserved their strength with the wisdom of age, and Edna Graham, the beta-ranked volunteer, kept pace just behind Guy, her golden-brown wolf alert and watchful. They crossed into neutral territory by early afternoon. The forest here was wild, unclaimed by any pack, a buffer zone between territories. Birds sang in the trees, deer scattered at their approach. Everything felt normal, peaceful, alive. It wouldn't stay that way. Sherry felt the change around 3 hours into their journey. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle shift in the air. The birdsong faded. The forest grew quieter. And through the pack bonds connecting her to the other Silvercrest wolves, she felt their unease growing. Guy called a halt in a small clearing. They shifted back to human form, and Sherry was grateful she'd worn practical clothing under her wolf form. The others had done the same, travel clothes, nothing fancy, prepared for quick shifts between forms. "We're getting close," Guy said, his voice low. "Another hour. Maybe less, and we'll reach the edge of the affected area." "How do you know?" Christopher asked, his young face pale. The silence. Lyle Harrington sat on a fallen log, catching his breath. Old wolves know that sound, or the lack of it. When predators move through, prey animals flee or hide. The forest goes quiet. "But this is worse than regular predator silence," Mitzi added. Her sister Roseanne had the same steady competence. "This feels like the forest itself is holding its breath." Sherry felt it too. Something wrong in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks. But there were no clouds, no wind, just that oppressive quiet. "From here we move more carefully," Guy said. "Stay in human form for now. Easier to observe, easier to retreat if needed. Sherry, you and I should probably hang back once we sight the darkness." "If it really does target power, putting the Alpha and Luna closest is dangerous." "Agreed," Sherry said, though every instinct screamed against hiding while others took risks. "We observe from a distance. The Omegas approach first, test the reaction." "I don't like this plan," Edna said bluntly. "Sending our weakest wolves forward while the strongest hide feels backwards." "Everything about this is backwards," Teresa pointed out. "That's kind of the point." They moved forward again, this time on foot, wolf senses extended to catch any sign of the threat. The forest grew darker as they walked, though the sun hadn't set yet. Shadows seemed deeper here, thicker somehow, as if light couldn't fully penetrate. Then, Sherry saw the first dead tree. It stood alone in a small clearing, a massive oak that should have been in its prime, thick with leaves and life. Instead, its bark had turned black, twisted into unnatural shapes. The branches were bare, reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. And where the tree touched the ground, the grass had died in a perfect circle. "Gods," Christopher whispered. "Is that—" "That's where the darkness passed through," Guy said grimly. "Probably days ago, based on how dead the vegetation is." Sherry approached the tree carefully, felt wrongness radiating from it like heat from a fire. But not heat, cold. A bone-deep chill that made her wolf whimper inside her mind. She touched the blackened bark. It crumbled under her fingers, turned to ash that drifted away on wind that shouldn't exist. And beneath the ash, something moved. Not quite alive, not quite dead, just corrupted. "Don't touch it," Mitzi said sharply. "Whatever that darkness does, it leaves poison behind. Look at the ground." Sherry looked. The perfect circle of dead grass wasn't just dead. It was wrong. Gray and withered, yes, but also subtly twisted, as if the plants had tried to grow in directions that defied natural law before they died. "The reports mentioned this," Guy said. "Territory that turns dead after the darkness passes. But reading about it and seeing it are different things." "We're not even close to the darkness itself yet," Edna pointed out. "This is just residue from where it traveled days ago, if this is what it leaves behind." She didn't need to finish. They all understood. If the darkness's mere passing did this much damage,
What would direct exposure do? They moved deeper into the dead lands. More trees appeared, each one blackened and twisted. The ground beneath their feet grew softer, like walking on ash. Nothing grew here anymore. No grass, no flowers, no moss on stones. Just gray death spreading in the darkness's wake. The silence was absolute now. No birds, no insects, no wind through leaves, because there were no leaves left. Just 8 wolves walking through a graveyard of a forest. Sherry's Luna sense screamed warnings through the pack bonds. Danger ahead, wrongness ahead, turn back, run, flee while you still can. The other wolves felt it too. She sensed their growing fear, their instinct to retreat, but they pushed forward. Around a bend in the path, they found the first body. It had been a wolf once, large, male, probably a warrior based on his build. But what remained barely looked like anything that had once lived. The body was twisted, frozen in an expression of absolute terror, turned the same black as the trees. Where his claws had dug into the earth, the ground had turned to ash. Christopher turned and vomited. Teresa went pale but held steady. The older wolves exchanged grim looks. They'd seen death before, but not like this. "Don't touch it," Guy warned unnecessarily. No one wanted to get close to the corpse. "How long ago did he die?" Sherry asked. "Based on the vegetation death around him? 3, maybe 4 days." Lyle crouched at a safe distance, studying the scene with old warrior's eyes. He was running. See the stride pattern in the ash? Running south, away from something. It caught him anyway. "Was he from the 4th pack?" Edna asked. "The one that just fell?" "Probably. Tried to escape, couldn't outrun it." Guy's jaw clenched. "This is what happens when we run. The 3rd pack tried evacuation, remember? The darkness followed them, picked them off one by one." They documented the scene, careful not to touch anything, and moved on. More bodies appeared as they traveled deeper. Some wolves, some humans who'd been caught in human form. All of them twisted and blackened, frozen in expressions of terror or agony. Sherry forced herself to study each one, looking for patterns. Most were warriors. She could tell by their build, their weapons, their positioning. They'd died fighting or trying to fight, but she found 2 exceptions, a small body that might have been a child and what looked like an elder based on the gray in the hair that remained. "These 2, she called to Guy. "They died differently." He came to look. The bodies were still blackened, still twisted, but their expressions were different. Not terror, more like confusion, as if death had taken them before they fully understood what was happening. "The child might have frozen in fear," Guy said slowly, "like the survivors described. But then why did he die when other children lived?" "Maybe he fought at the last second," Teresa suggested. "Or maybe his parents tried to protect him, and their power pulled the darkness's attention. The elder, though," Sherry studied the body, "he looks like he just stopped, like whatever was keeping him alive just switched off." "Old Lyle from the survivor reports," Mitzi said quietly. "He wandered the ruins after, confused but alive. This one didn't make it. Question is why." They couldn't answer that. Too many variables, too little information. They pressed on. The sun was setting when they finally saw it. The darkness wasn't a thing so much as an absence, a void in reality that moved through the forest like smoke, but thicker, more substantial. It was difficult to look at directly. Sherry's eyes kept sliding away from it, refusing to focus on something that shouldn't exist. It moved slowly, almost deliberately, consuming everything in its path. Where it passed, trees blackened and died. Ground turned to ash, and the air itself seemed to thin, as if the darkness consumed oxygen along with life. Guy raised his hand, signaling the group to stop. They were perhaps 200 yards from the thing, hidden in the shadow of dead trees. Close enough to observe, too close for comfort. "This is insane," Christopher whispered. "We should run. We should observe," Sherry said firmly, though her own wolf was howling at her to flee. "That's why we came, to see how it reacts to different types of wolves." "Who goes first?" Edna asked. Despite her fear, her voice was steady.
warrior training holding against instinct. "I do," Teresa said. She stepped forward before anyone could argue. "I'm Omega. Low power, no authority. If the theory is right, I'm safest." "Teresa," Sherry started, "you'd go first yourself if I let you. But you're Luna now. You don't get to take every risk personally." Teresa's smile was shaky but genuine. "Besides, someone has to prove your theory right. Might as well be your best friend." Guy nodded slowly. "Move slowly. Don't approach too close. Stay at least 50 yards out. Watch how it reacts to your presence. If it turns toward you, if it shows any interest at all, retreat immediately." Teresa took a breath, squared her shoulders, and walked toward the darkness. Sherry watched through the pack bonds, felt Teresa's terror warring with determination, felt the exact moment she came within the darkness's potential awareness, a subtle shift, like stepping into a predator's territory. The darkness continued its slow movement. No change, no reaction. Teresa took another step, then another. She was 40 yards from it now, close enough that Sherry could see the darkness more clearly. It wasn't just black. It was the absence of light, the absence of life, the absence of everything. Looking at it hurt, like staring at something her mind wasn't equipped to process. Still no reaction. Teresa moved closer. 30 yards. 25. Close enough that the ash beneath her feet was still warm from the darkness's recent passage. "That's enough," Guy called softly. "Come back." Teresa retreated slowly, not turning her back on the darkness. When she rejoined the group, she was shaking. "It didn't react at all," she said. "I was right there, and it was like I didn't exist, like I wasn't worth noticing." "The theory holds so far," Sherry said. Her heart pounded with relief and growing certainty. "Christopher, you're next. Another Omega, different wolf. Let's see if the reaction is consistent." Christopher looked terrified but nodded. He repeated Teresa's approach, slow, careful, watching the darkness for any sign of interest. Got even closer than Teresa had, within 20 yards, before Guy called him back. "Same result," Christopher reported. "It ignored me completely." They tested the older wolves next. Lyle and Mitzi both approached the darkness. Both were ignored. Their power levels were minimal. Age had stolen most of their dominance, left them barely registering on the supernatural hierarchy. "Edna," Guy said, "you're beta ranked, more power than the others. If the theory is right, this is where we'll see different behavior." Edna stepped forward, visibly steeling herself. She approached the darkness more carefully than the others had, watching it with a warrior's tactical assessment. At 50 yards, nothing happened. At 40 yards, still nothing. At 30 yards, the darkness shifted. It was subtle, just a slight change in movement pattern, a momentary pause in its consumption of the forest, as if something had caught its attention. "That's far enough," Guy said sharply. But Edna had already seen the reaction. She backed away quickly, and the darkness returned to its previous pattern of movement. No pursuit, no aggression, just that momentary pause, that flicker of awareness. "It noticed me," Edna said when she returned. "Didn't chase, didn't attack, but it knew I was there." "Beta rank is the threshold," Sherry said, her mind racing. "Below that, you're beneath notice. At or above it, you register as something worth awareness, even if not worth immediate action." "Which means alpha rank." Guy didn't finish the sentence. "Your turn," Sherry said, "but stay farther back than the others. If beta rank triggers awareness, alpha rank might trigger aggression." Guy nodded. He walked toward the darkness, and Sherry felt the shift immediately through their connection. The darkness's attention sharpened, focused. At 100 yards, it paused in its consumption of the forest. At 80 yards, it turned. The movement was wrong in ways Sherry's mind struggled to process. The darkness didn't have a front or back, didn't have eyes or a face, but somehow it oriented itself toward Guy, focused on him with something that felt like hunger. "Guy, stop!" Sherry called. "That's far enough." But Guy took another step forward, testing, pushing the boundary. The darkness moved toward him, not fast, but deliberately, purposefully, like a predator that had spotted worthy prey. "Guy, get back here now!" Sherry's Luna authority cracked through the command. Guy retreated, moving backward, keeping his eyes on the darkness. It followed for perhaps 20 yards, then stopped, assessed, and slowly returned to its previous path of destruction through the forest. When Guy rejoined them, he was breathing hard. "It wanted me, could feel it through the alpha power, like recognizing like predator to predator, except I'm not the predator in this scenario." "Alpha rank triggers active interest," Sherry said. "Beta rank triggers awareness. Below beta, you're invisible." She looked at the group. "The theory is confirmed. Power attracts it. Powerlessness makes you safe." "Then what do we do?" Christopher asked. "We can't just stop being powerful. The alpha can't stop being alpha." "No," Sherry agreed, "but maybe we can suppress it. Mask it somehow. Make ourselves read as less powerful than we are." "How?" Edna demanded. "Power isn't something you can just turn off." Sherry thought about the trial, about becoming Luna, about pack bonds and authority and the weight of dominance. All of it was supernatural, magical in nature, and magic could be manipulated. "We need to understand what it's sensing," she said slowly. "Is it physical power? Magical power? Authority? Dominance? If we knew exactly what triggers its interest, we might be able to hide it." "We should test that," Teresa said. "I could approach it again, but this time project dominance. See if behavior changes when an omega acts like an alpha." "Too dangerous," Guy said immediately. "Everything about this is dangerous. But if we need to know whether it's actual power or perceived power that matters," Teresa's logic was sound. Sherry considered it. The question was crucial. Did the darkness sense inherent power, or could perception and behavior fool it? If an omega could appear dominant enough to trigger interest, that suggested behavior mattered. If dominance in an omega still didn't register, then it was truly about innate power levels. "All right," Sherry said, "but stay farther back than before. Project dominance from 50 yards out, just enough for us to see if behavior changes." Teresa nodded. She walked toward the darkness again, but this time her posture was different. Head high, shoulders back, radiating confidence and authority. She was still Omega, nothing could change that. But she was acting like a wolf who expected obedience, who commanded respect. The darkness didn't react at all. Teresa pushed harder, channeling every bit of dominant energy she could manage, walked with purpose, stood tall, even let out a low growl of challenge. Nothing. The darkness continued its slow consumption of the forest, completely uninterested in an omega pretending to be powerful. "It's not behavior," Sherry said when Teresa returned. "It's not about how you act or what you project. It's inherent power, supernatural ranking, the magic that makes an alpha a beta. So we can't fake our way past it," Guy said grimly. "It senses what we actually are, not what we pretend to be." The sun had fully set now. The darkness was harder to see in the growing night, defined only by the way stars disappeared when it passed beneath them. And something about nightfall made it feel more dangerous, more present. "We have what we came for," Van would have said if he were here. Intelligence gathered, theory confirmed. Time to return home. But Sherry felt compelled to stay, to study the darkness more. There was something she was missing, some crucial piece of understanding that hovered just beyond her grasp. She approached the darkness herself. "Sherry, no!" Guy started. "I'm Luna," she called back. "I need to know how it reacts to me specifically." She walked forward slowly, feeling the pack bonds humming with concern from the others. Her Luna power was different from Alpha power. Less about dominance, more about connection. Less about commanding, more about nurturing. Would the darkness distinguish between them? At 80 yards, the darkness paused. At 60 yards, it turned toward her. But the quality of its attention felt different than it had with Guy. Less hungry, more curious? As if she registered as interesting, but not necessarily threatening or prey-like. Sherry held her ground, studied the darkness from this closer vantage, and for just a moment, she thought she saw something within it, not a shape exactly, but a presence. Something ancient and aware and utterly alien to everything she understood about the world. Then it spoke. The voice was the same one from her dream, old as mountains, cold as winter's heart. But this time she was awake, and it was real, and the words carved themselves into her consciousness like ice. "Little Luna, you came to see me. How unexpected." Sherry froze. Behind her, she heard Guy shout something, heard the others react with alarm. But the darkness's attention held her pinned, unable to move or look away. "You think you can survive me with clever tricks, with hiding and submission and making yourself small. But I see you, little Luna. See what you truly are." "What am I?" Sherry forced the words out. "Broken, rejected, cast aside by the one who should have valued you most. And yet you rise, you lead, you hope." The darkness's laughter was like breaking glass. "Hope is a poison, little Luna, and I am the cure." The presence pressed closer, and Sherry felt cold radiating from it. Not physical cold, but the chill of absolute despair, of certainty that nothing mattered and nothing could be saved. "When I come for your pack, and I will come soon, your powerlessness will not save you. Your clever observations will not save you. Nothing will save you. Because I do not consume power, little Luna. I consume the will to resist. And you, of all wolves, should understand how easily will breaks." Images flooded Sherry's mind. Guy rejecting her, the mate bond shattering, a year of loneliness and pain and feeling worthless. The darkness took those memories and amplified them, made them fresh and agonizing all over again. "You think you've healed? You think acceptance of Luna makes you whole? You're still broken, little Luna, still rejected, still unworthy. And when I arrive, when I show your pack the futility of resistance, you will remember what it means to be powerless, truly powerless." Sherry screamed. Guy was there instantly, pulling her back, putting himself between her and the darkness. His alpha power flared, protective and desperate. The darkness hissed, actually hissed, and retreated slightly. "We're leaving," Guy snarled. "Now! All of you, move!" The group ran. They crashed through the dead forest, ash flying up behind them, the darkness's presence pressing at their backs. Sherry ran blindly, tears streaming down her face, that ancient voice still echoing in her mind. Broken, rejected, unworthy. They ran until the forest started showing signs of life again, until birds called in the distance and grass grew beneath their feet, until the oppressive silence lifted and the world felt real again. Only then did they stop, gasping for breath, checking that everyone had made it. "What happened?" Teresa grabbed Sherry's shoulders. "What did it do to you?" "It spoke," Sherry managed. Her voice shook. "It knew me, knew about the rejection, about—" She couldn't finish. Guy's expression was murder. "What did it say?" Sherry told them. Every word, every image, every piece of psychological warfare the darkness had deployed. When she finished, the group looked shaken. "It attacked your mind," Edna said, "not your body, your confidence, your hope, your sense of worth." "That's what it does," Sherry realized, the pieces clicking together even through her distress. The reports, survivors talked about overwhelming despair, about losing the will to fight. They said the darkness makes you feel like resistance is pointless. That's its real weapon. Not physical destruction, psychological destruction. "It consumes the will to resist," Guy repeated her words. "That's why power attracts it. Because powerful wolves have the strongest wills, the most determination to fight back. It targets them first to break the pack's morale. And once morale breaks, once everyone loses hope, then the physical destruction becomes easy." Sherry wiped her eyes, forced herself to think clearly despite the emotional turmoil. "It doesn't need to fight us directly. It just needs to make us give up." "Then how do we beat it?" Christopher asked. "If it attacks our will to fight, how do we resist something that makes resistance feel impossible?" Sherry didn't have an answer. Not yet. The darkness's words still haunted her, made her doubt everything she'd built since the rejection, made her question her worthiness, her capability, her right to lead. Broken, rejected, unworthy. But she'd felt something else too, in that moment when the darkness spoke to her, something beneath the despair and the psychological warfare. Fear. The darkness had been surprised that she approached it, had called her appearance unexpected, as if Lunas weren't supposed to come looking for threats, as if leadership investigating danger directly was somehow wrong or contrary to pattern. "It doesn't understand us," Sherry said slowly. "The darkness. It knows pack hierarchy, knows about alpha dominance and power structures, but it doesn't understand why I would voluntarily face it, why a Luna would risk herself to gather intelligence." "So what?" Mitzi asked. "How does that help?" "I don't know yet, but it's something. A weakness, maybe, or at least a gap in its knowledge." Sherry stood straighter, forced steel into her spine despite her shaking hands. "We have intelligence now, more than we came for. We know it targets power, we know it attacks will and morale, and we know it doesn't fully understand wolves who act outside traditional patterns. We also know it's coming for us," Guy added grimly. "And soon. If it's at that position now, it'll reach Silvercrest in 2 days, maybe less. 2 days to figure out how to protect 300 wolves from something that consumed the will to resist. 2 days to turn psychological insight into actual strategy. And 2 days to prove that a broken, rejected Omega Luna could see clearly enough to save her pack. The journey back to Silvercrest was quiet, each wolf lost in their own thoughts. Sherry felt the darkness's words haunting her with every step, but she also felt something else growing inside her. Not confidence. She'd lost that back in the Deadlands. But determination. Stubborn, desperate determination to prove that being broken didn't mean being incapable. The darkness thought it understood her, thought her rejection made her weak, made her vulnerable to despair. It was wrong. Being rejected had taught her to survive when everything felt hopeless, had taught her to find worth in herself, even when others dismissed her. Had taught her that the will to resist didn't come from being strong, it came from having already survived the worst and refusing to give up. The darkness would learn that lesson soon enough. Chapter 8. The Will to Resist. They reached Silvercrest just before dawn. The pack house was already lit, council members and warriors waiting anxiously for their return. Beta Van stood at the gates, his relief visible when he counted 8 figures emerging from the forest, instead of empty silence. "You made it," Van said, then saw Sherry's face. "What happened?" "Intelligence gathered," Guy said curtly, "and confirmation that we're dealing with something worse than we imagined. Gather the council. We need to brief everyone immediately." Word spread quickly through the pack bonds. Within an hour, the council chamber was full, not just the formal members, but warriors, healers, and senior pack members who had a right to know what threatened them. Sherry stood beside Guy, still shaken from the darkness's words, but forcing herself to focus. Guy presented their findings methodically. The theory confirmed, the darkness's targeting of power, the psychological warfare it deployed. The room grew quieter as he spoke, fear spreading through the assembled wolves. 2 days, Elder Nelda said when Guy finished. "You're telling us we have 2 days before that thing reaches our territory?" "At its current speed, yes. Maybe less if it accelerates." Guy's hands clenched on the table. "And we now know that traditional defense is worse than useless. It's actively counterproductive. Fighting back makes us targets." "So we just give up?" Fernando's voice carried barely controlled fury. "Let this thing consume us without resistance?" "No," Sherry said. She'd been silent until now, gathering her thoughts. "We resist, but not the way you're thinking. Not with physical combat or magical defense. We resist by refusing to give it what it wants." "And what does it want?" Patrick Yang demanded. "Despair.
broken will, the loss of hope that makes resistance feel impossible. Sherry moved to stand where everyone could see her. The darkness doesn't just consume power. It feeds on the psychological collapse that comes from overwhelming force. It wants us to feel helpless, to believe survival is impossible, to give up before it even arrives. Then how do we resist that? Roseanne asked quietly. How do we maintain hope against something that literally attacks our will to fight? Sherry took a breath. This was the crucial moment. The point where her theory either made sense or revealed itself as catastrophic delusion. We acknowledge what we're feeling, she said. Fear, despair, the sense that this is impossible. We don't hide from those emotions. We accept them, because trying to suppress fear just gives it more power over us. You want us to embrace despair? Nelda looked horrified. That's your strategy? No, I want us to acknowledge it without letting it control us. There's a difference. Sherry thought about her year of rejection, about learning to survive when everything felt hopeless. When Guy rejected me, I felt worthless, believed I deserved abandonment. That despair nearly destroyed me, but I survived because I eventually learned something crucial. Feeling broken doesn't mean being broken. Acknowledging pain doesn't equal surrendering to it. The room was silent. Everyone focused on her words. The darkness attacked me personally last night, Sherry continued. Used my worst memories against me. Told me I was still rejected, still unworthy, still powerless. And for a moment, it worked. I believed it, felt that old despair like it was fresh. Then what changed? Teresa asked from the back of the room. I remembered that I survived being rejected. I survived a year of isolation and self-doubt and feeling like I'd never be enough. I survived all of that, and then I passed a trial that defeated 7 wolves who were better than me. Sherry's voice strengthened. The darkness thinks psychological warfare will break us, but wolves who've already survived their worst fears are harder to break than it realizes. Guy nodded slowly. You're saying our vulnerabilities are actually strengths? I'm saying that acknowledging vulnerability without surrendering to it is a form of resistance the darkness doesn't understand. Sherry turned to the maps on the wall. It targets power because powerful wolves have the most to lose, the furthest to fall. But wolves who've already fallen? Wolves who've survived loss and pain and come through the other side? We know despair doesn't last forever. We know you can be broken and still keep going. This is insane, Fernando muttered. But he didn't sound as certain as before. It's also the only approach that hasn't been tested and failed, Van pointed out. 4 packs tried physical combat, magical defense, evacuation, and fortification. All failed. Maybe Luna Sherry's right that we need a completely different strategy. But how do we implement it? Elder Patrick demanded. You're talking about collective psychological resilience. That's not something you can command or organize. No, Sherry agreed, but it is something we can prepare for, starting now. She moved to the table, began outlining her plan. It came together as she spoke, pieces clicking into place with the clarity that had led her pass the trial. First, we evacuate the most vulnerable. Children, the very young, those who haven't fully developed psychological defenses. Send them south with guardians, not warriors, just caregivers. Small groups, low power, traveling separately so they're beneath the darkness's notice. That could work, Roseanne said thoughtfully. Children survived in the other packs. We evacuate ours before the darkness arrives. Second, we restructure pack hierarchy temporarily. Warriors stand down from active duty. Alphas and betas suppress their dominance as much as possible. We create a temporary flattened structure where power isn't being actively wielded or displayed. You want the alpha to stop being alpha? Nelda looked at Guy. That goes against everything pack law teaches. Pack law is about survival first, Guy said. If suppressing my alpha presence gives us better odds, I'll do it. The question is whether it's even possible to suppress inherent power. Wolves can mask their rank when necessary, Mitzi spoke up. Scouts do it all the time when infiltrating enemy territory. It's difficult and exhausting, but possible for limited periods. Third, Sherry continued,
We prepare everyone psychologically for what's coming. No lies about how easy this will be. No false reassurance. Everyone needs to understand exactly what the darkness does, that it attacks hope and will and the sense that resistance matters. Because if they know that's coming, if they're prepared for that specific attack, it might be less effective. You want to tell 300 wolves that their greatest enemy will make them feel hopeless, Patrick said slowly. You think that will help? I think surprises are what break people. Prepared pain is more bearable than unexpected pain. Sherry met his eyes. And I think wolves deserve honesty about what they're facing. The council exchanged glances. What Sherry proposed went against every instinct of pack leadership, admitting vulnerability, suppressing power, acknowledging that traditional strength was useless here. There's one more thing, Sherry said. The most important thing. When the darkness arrives, everyone needs to remember why they're surviving. Not grand concepts like duty or honor. Personal reasons, small things, people they love, moments they want to experience again, memories that matter. Why? Fernando asked. Because despair attacks the big picture first. Makes you feel like nothing matters, like all effort is futile. But specific, small, personal reasons to keep going are harder to destroy. They're tangible, real, immediate. Sherry thought about what had pulled her through her darkest days. For me, it was mornings at the archive, the smell of old paper, the satisfaction of organizing chaos. Small things that gave me purpose when everything else felt meaningless. Teresa spoke from the back. For me, it's my sister's laugh. She lives 2 territories south. I want to hear that laugh again. That's worth surviving for. For me, it's my grandson, Lyle Harrington added. He's 3, asks a million questions. I want to answer more of them. Around the room, wolves began sharing. Small reasons, personal reasons, things worth living for that the darkness's grand despair couldn't easily touch. Guy watched Sherry with something like wonder. You're building collective resilience through individual connections, making everyone remember what they're fighting for. I'm reminding everyone that hopelessness is a lie, Sherry corrected. That even when everything feels impossible, there are small truths that remain solid. Love, memory. The desire to see one more sunrise, those truths are harder to break than the darkness realizes. This could work, Van said slowly. It's insane, completely contrary to everything we've been taught about pack defense, but it could actually work. Or it could get us all killed, Patrick countered, but even he sounded less certain now. Guy stood. We vote, council members only. The question, do we implement Luna Sherry's strategy, or do we prepare traditional defense? Traditional defense has 100% failure rate against this threat, Van reminded them. Luna Sherry's strategy is untested, Nelda shot back. We'd be gambling everything on theory. Everything is a gamble at this point, Roseanne said. At least this gamble is based on actual observation and analysis. I vote yes to Luna Sherry's plan. As do I, Van said. Fernando hesitated, then nodded. Yes, against every instinct I have, yes. Because the Luna's right. Traditional strength makes us targets here. Patrick and Nelda exchanged long looks. Finally, Nelda spoke. Conditional, yes. We implement the plan, but if it starts failing, if the darkness breaks through anyway, we reserve the right to shift to traditional defense as last resort. That's not how this works, Sherry said. You can't half commit to psychological resilience. Either we trust the strategy completely, or we don't use it at all. Doubt undermines everything. Then you're asking for absolute faith in an untested strategy, Patrick said. I'm asking for the courage to try something different instead of repeating failures that got 4 packs killed. Sherry's voice was hard. But yes, it requires faith. In me, in Guy, in the strategy. Without that faith, it won't work. The council members looked at each other. The weight of 300 lives pressed down on the decision. Yes, Nelda said finally. Full commitment. We implement Luna Sherry's strategy completely. May the moon goddess forgive us if we're wrong. And guide us if we're right, Patrick added. Yes, full implementation.
Guy nodded. The vote is unanimous. We proceed with Luna Sherry's plan. He turned to the assembled wolves. Everyone has assignments. Fernando, coordinate the children's evacuation. Roseanne, prepare supply packs for the guardians. Nothing that displays wealth or power. Van, start working with ranked wolves on power suppression techniques. Elders, help me brief the pack on what's coming. The meeting broke up, wolves scattering to their tasks. Sherry felt the pack bonds humming with activity, fear mixing with desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, their Luna had seen something the other packs missed. Teresa caught her arm as she left the chamber. That was brilliant, terrifying, but brilliant. It has to work, Sherry said, because if it doesn't, don't think about failure. You just gave everyone a speech about maintaining hope through despair. Practice what you preach. Teresa squeezed her hand. We survived the darkness ignoring us last night. We'll survive it ignoring us when it arrives. It won't ignore everyone. It noticed Edna at beta rank. It definitely noticed Guy and me. Sherry's voice dropped. It spoke to me, Teresa. Knew my name, knew my history. That thing is aware and intelligent. Not just some mindless force. Then we're lucky our Luna is also aware and intelligent. Teresa smiled. Go rest. You look like death. We've got one more day to prepare, and you need to be sharp when the darkness arrives. Sherry wanted to argue, wanted to keep working, but exhaustion pulled at her. She'd been awake for over 24 hours, had faced psychological warfare from an ancient evil, and was running on nothing but determination and fear. She made it back to her cottage and collapsed on the bed without undressing. Sleep claimed her immediately, and with it came dreams. She stood in the ceremonial circle again, the night of her rejection. But this time, Guy wasn't the only one there. The darkness stood behind him, formless and vast, its presence making the moonlight dim. You think you can save them? It whispered. You think your clever observations and psychological insights will protect 300 wolves from inevitability? It's not inevitable, Sherry said. We can resist you. Can you? The darkness moved closer. Tell me, little Luna, when the despair comes, when every wolf in your pack feels the futility of resistance, who will hold them together? You? The rejected Omega who barely holds herself together? I survived rejection. That's more than you understand. You survived by hiding, by making yourself small and insignificant, by accepting that you weren't worthy of love or leadership. The darkness laughed. And now you're Luna, pretending that title makes you whole. But you know the truth. You're still that broken Omega, still unworthy, still rejected. The circlet on your head changes nothing. You're wrong, Sherry forced the words out. Being broken taught me how to survive. Being rejected taught me that worth doesn't come from others' acceptance. You think those experiences make me weak, but they're exactly why I can resist you. We shall see. The dream shifted. She saw Silvercrest territory consumed by darkness, saw her pack falling one by one to despair, saw wolves giving up, laying down, accepting death as inevitable, saw Guy's eyes go hollow as hope drained away, saw Teresa stop fighting, stop caring, stop believing survival was possible, saw herself standing in the ashes alone, the last wolf awake in a territory of the broken. This is your future, little Luna. This is what you're leading your pack toward. Failure, death. Proof that clever strategies mean nothing against ancient power. No. Sherry's voice was small but steady. This is what you want me to believe, but I won't. We won't. Such certainty from one who has been so thoroughly broken, such faith from one who is cast aside. I almost admire it. The darkness pressed closer. But admiration won't save you. Nothing will save you. I am inevitable as winter, as death, as despair itself. And you, little Luna, are just one small wolf trying to hold back the tide. Then I'll drown trying, Sherry said, because that's what survivors do. We keep fighting even when fighting seems pointless. We keep hoping even when hope seems foolish. We keep surviving because the alternative is giving up, and we've already survived too much to surrender now. The darkness was silent for a long moment. Then, "You are more interesting than I anticipated. I look forward to breaking you personally." Sherry woke gasping. Outside her window, the sun was setting. She'd slept the entire day away, exhausted by the previous night's expedition. The pack bonds hummed with activity, preparations continuing, children being evacuated, wolves learning to suppress their power signatures. One day left, maybe less. Sherry dressed in practical clothes, splashed water on her face, and headed to the pack house. Guy was in his office, studying maps and reports. "You're awake," he said. "Good. We've made progress on evacuations. 37 children and their guardians left in small groups throughout the day. They're traveling separately, each group taking different routes south." "Good. How's the power suppression training going?" "Harder than expected. Warriors especially are struggling with it. Dominance is so ingrained in their identity that suppressing it feels like denying fundamental parts of themselves." Guy rubbed his eyes. "Van's working with them, but it's slow going." "It doesn't have to be perfect. Just enough to reduce their power signatures, make them less obvious targets." Sherry moved to the maps. "Where's the darkness now?" Guy pointed to a mark on the northern border. "Last scout report came in an hour ago. It's moving faster than before. We'll reach our territory by tomorrow morning. Maybe dawn, maybe mid-morning, but soon." Tomorrow. The word hung heavy between them. "How are you doing?" Sherry asked. "Really, not as alpha as Guy." He looked at her, and she saw exhaustion and fear and grim determination. Terrified. Trying not to show it because the pack needs confident leadership, but terrified. "Good. Fear means you understand what we're facing. False confidence would be worse." Sherry sat in the chair across from his desk. "The darkness spoke to me again. In dreams, said it looks forward to breaking me personally." "Sherry, I'm telling you because you need to know. If tomorrow comes and the darkness targets me specifically, if it tries to break me in front of the pack, you need to be prepared for that. Need to be ready to hold everyone else together if I fall apart." Guy's expression was fierce. "You won't fall apart." "I might. That thing knows exactly how to hurt me, knows which memories to weaponize. I'm strong, but I'm not invulnerable." Sherry met his eyes. "That's what I'm trying to teach the pack, that acknowledging vulnerability isn't surrender, that you can be afraid and still resist, that being broken doesn't mean being defeated." "You're the strongest wolf I know," Guy said quietly. "Not because you're unbreakable, because you've been broken and kept going anyway." Something shifted between them. Not romance, that ship had sailed and sunk, but partnership, understanding, the recognition that they'd both been broken by circumstances, by prophecies, by choices that seemed right at the time and proved catastrophic, and they'd both survived anyway. "Tomorrow," Sherry said, "we face it together, Alpha and Luna united." "Together," Guy agreed. "Whatever comes." They worked through the night, finalizing preparations. Beta Van coordinated watch schedules. Fernando positioned warriors in support roles rather than defensive ones. They wouldn't fight the darkness, but they could help maintain pack cohesion, keep wolves calm, prevent panic. Roseanne prepared medical supplies for psychological trauma as well as physical injuries, and throughout the territory, 300 wolves prepared to face something that had destroyed 4 packs. Dawn came too quickly. Sherry stood on the pack house balcony, watching the sky lighten. The pack bonds hummed with fear, but also with determination. Her wolves, her responsibility, her pack to protect or fail. "It's here," Guy said from behind her. Sherry didn't ask how he knew. She could feel it through the pack bonds, a disturbance on the northern border, a coldness spreading through the territory, the sense of wrongness that preceded the darkness's arrival.
She descended to the main square where the pack had gathered, 300 wolves minus the children who'd been evacuated. 300 lives depending on her strategy being right. "Listen to me," Sherry said, her Luna voice carrying across the square. "What's coming will try to break your will, will make you feel like resistance is pointless, like survival is impossible, like everything you care about is already lost. That's its weapon, not claws or teeth or physical violence, despair." The pack was silent, fear rippling through the bonds. "You're going to feel that despair," Sherry continued. "All of us will, and that's okay. Feeling hopeless doesn't mean you are hopeless. Feeling broken doesn't mean you are broken. The darkness wants you to confuse feelings with reality. Don't give it that power." She thought about Luna Edith's letter, about being willing to see clearly even when uncomfortable. Remember your reasons, why you're surviving, who you love, what matters. Hold those truths close because they're real in ways the despair isn't. And when the darkness tries to convince you that nothing matters, remember this moment. Remember that your Luna and your Alpha are facing it beside you, that you're not alone in this. Guy stepped forward. "The darkness is here. It's crossing our northern border now. Everyone, suppress your power. Warriors, stand down. Ranked wolves, mask your dominance. We become as close to invisible as possible, and we endure." Through the pack bonds, Sherry felt the darkness's presence growing closer, felt the first whispers of despair starting to seep into her wolf's consciousness. The test had begun, and Silvercrest's survival depended on 300 wolves learning to resist by refusing to fight. Chapter 9. The Test of Will. The darkness arrived like a slow-moving storm. Sherry felt it through the pack bonds first, a creeping cold that had nothing to do with temperature. It started at the northern border and spread inward, a psychological weight pressing down on every conscious mind in Silvercrest territory. The pack stood in the main square, 300 wolves trying to suppress their natural instincts. Warriors fought the urge to draw weapons. Ranked wolves struggled to mask their dominance. And everyone felt the first tendrils of despair curling into their thoughts. Why resist? It's pointless. You've already lost. Sherry recognized the darkness's voice, even though it spoke inside her mind rather than aloud. The same ancient presence from her dreams, from the dead lands, now pressing against every wolf in her pack simultaneously. "Hold steady," Guy said quietly. His alpha power was suppressed, reduced to barely a flicker. It made him look diminished somehow, smaller than he should be, but Sherry felt his determination through their connection. "Remember your reasons. Remember why you're enduring this." Through the pack bonds, Sherry monitored her wolves. Some were handling it better than others. The Omegas, used to being dismissed and overlooked, found power suppression easier. The warriors struggled most. Dominance was so core to their identity that hiding it felt like denying their own existence. Fernando stood near the square's edge, his face drawn tight with effort. Beside him, several younger warriors were shaking, fighting their instincts to shift, to fight, to do something rather than just standing there vulnerable. "Fernando," Sherry called quietly, "tell them about your daughter, the one who was evacuated this morning." Fernando blinked, focused on her. "What?" "Your daughter. Why you want to survive this. Tell them." Understanding crossed his face. "Her name is Autumn. She's 6. Obsessed with butterflies, collects them in drawings she makes." His voice steadied as he spoke. "Before she left this morning, she made me promise to be here when she comes home, to see her new drawings. That's why I'm surviving this. For butterfly drawings and a 6-year-old's promises." The warriors near him visibly settled, small reasons, personal reasons, anchors against the rising tide of despair. The darkness moved closer. Sherry could see it now at the edge of the territory, the same formless void she'd witnessed in the Deadlands, consuming trees and ground as it advanced, but slower here, more cautious, as if it sensed something different about Silvercrest. "Interesting,"
that ancient voice murmured in Sherry's mind. "You're hiding, suppressing your power like frightened prey. Did you think that would save you, little Luna?" "We're not hiding," Sherry said aloud, though the words were meant for the darkness. "We're choosing not to engage." Same thing. Fear dressed up as strategy. No, fear would be running. Fear would be fighting mindlessly. This is deliberate resistance through non-resistance. The darkness laughed, and the sound carried through every wolf's consciousness. Several pack members whimpered. A young warrior dropped to his knees, overwhelmed by the psychological pressure. "Stand up," Van said firmly, moving to help the warrior. "Remember your training. Pain is temporary. This feeling of helplessness is temporary. What matters is that you keep standing." The warrior struggled to his feet, leaning on Van for support. The darkness reached the main square. It was like being submerged in ice water, cold, shocking, absolute. The psychological pressure intensified 100-fold. Despair crashed over the pack like a physical wave. Nothing matters. Your pack will fall. Your loved ones will die. Your resistance is meaningless. Give up. Accept the inevitable. Let go. Wolves collapsed throughout the square. Not physically attacked, just overwhelmed by the certainty that survival was impossible. Sherry felt their anguish through the pack bonds. 30 wolves down, then 40, then 50. Not dead, just broken by hopelessness. "Remember your reasons," Sherry called out, fighting her own rising despair. Fernando's daughter drawing butterflies, Lyle's grandson asking questions, Teresa's sister's laugh. Hold on to those truths. Truth? The darkness swirled closer to Sherry. "Shall I tell them the truth, little Luna? That you're a rejected Omega pretending to be a leader? That your mate bond was severed because you weren't worthy? That everything you've built since then is compensation for fundamental inadequacy?" The words hit like physical blows. Around the square, wolves turned to look at Sherry, and she felt their doubt through the pack bonds. Their Luna rejected. Their Luna deemed unworthy by her own mate. How could she lead them if she couldn't even maintain a mate bond? "Yes," Sherry said, her voice shaking but audible. "That's all true. Guy rejected me. I spent a year believing I was worthless. I am a rejected Omega who had no business becoming Luna." The pack stirred, confusion mixing with the despair. "But here's what else is true," Sherry continued, forcing strength into her voice. "I survived that rejection. I survived a year of isolation and self-doubt. I passed a trial that 7 better wolves failed. And I'm standing here now, facing you, refusing to let ancient despair define me. Because survival isn't about being unbroken. It's about getting back up after you're broken." She turned to face where she sensed the darkness's focus. "You think weaponizing my rejection will break me, but I've already been broken by it, already survived it. You're using a weapon I've already learned to endure." Brave words from one so fragile. Not brave, honest. There's a difference. Sherry looked at her pack. Everyone here has pain. Everyone here has been hurt, rejected by someone, failed at something, lost something precious. That's not weakness. That's being alive. And being alive means you can be hurt without being destroyed. Through the pack bonds, she felt something shift. Her wolves had seen her vulnerability, had heard her acknowledge the rejection that everyone whispered about, but no one mentioned directly. And instead of weakness, they saw courage, the courage to face shame and pain and keep leading anyway. Guy moved to stand beside her. "I rejected Sherry," he said loudly. "Felt our mate bond snap into place and rejected her in front of this entire pack because I believed a failed prophecy. That's my shame, my mistake, my burden to carry." The darkness focused on Guy, and Sherry felt its attention sharpen. "Ah, the alpha who destroys his own mate. Tell me, Alpha Knight, how does it feel to know you broke something the moon goddess herself created? How does it feel to carry that guilt every time you look at her?" Guy's face went pale, but he held steady. "It feels terrible, like I destroyed something precious and irreplaceable, like I made the worst mistake of my life listening to fear instead of trusting destiny."
And yet here you stand, Alpha and Luna, pretending your partnership is anything but fractured and false, pretending that broken bonds can lead a pack. We're not pretending, Sherry said.
Our bond is broken. Our trust is damaged. We're leading from a place of acknowledged failure rather than assumed perfection. And maybe that's exactly what this pack needs. Leaders who understand that you can be broken and still function, hurt and still lead, imperfect and still effective. Around the square, more wolves were standing back up. The ones who'd collapsed under initial despair were finding their feet again. Because their leaders weren't hiding their vulnerabilities, they were wielding them as shields against psychological warfare. The darkness swirled through the square, passing over wolves, assessing them. And Sherry watched with held breath as it moved past Omegas without reaction, slowed near Beta-ranked wolves, stopped completely near Fernando and Edna. "Warriors," the darkness murmured, "even suppressed. I smell your dominance, your desire to fight, your belief that strength matters." Fernando stood frozen as the darkness circled him. Through the pack bonds, Sherry felt his terror warring with warrior discipline. "Don't fight," Van called to him. "Don't engage. Think about your daughter's drawings. Think about being there when she comes home." "Your daughter," the darkness said to Fernando directly. "Safe in the south, you believe. But what's to stop me from following her scent? From finding every evacuated child and consuming them in front of their guardians? Your protective instincts mean nothing against ancient power." Fernando's face contorted. His wolf surfaced, dominance flaring as protective fury overrode careful suppression. "You won't touch my daughter!" "Fernando, no!" Sherry shouted. Too late. The darkness struck. Not physically, but Fernando's eyes went distant, vacant. He stood frozen, still breathing but somehow absent, like something essential had been pulled out of him. "What did you do to him?" Guy demanded, moving toward Fernando. "I consumed his will to resist. He challenged me with dominance and protective fury, so I took his ability to feel those things. He'll stand there until he dies of thirst or hunger, unable to care enough to move." Horror rippled through the pack. Several warriors surged forward, fury overriding suppression. The darkness struck them too. One after another, 5 warriors left standing but hollow, their wills consumed. "Stop!" Sherry's Luna voice cracked like thunder. "Everyone stop! Don't engage! Don't challenge! That's exactly what it wants!" The pack froze, but damage was done. 6 wolves standing but dead inside. 6 examples of what happened when you fought back. "You see?" The darkness's voice carried satisfaction. "Resistance is futile. Fight me, and I consume your will. Hide from me, and you merely delay the inevitable. There is no winning here, little Luna. Only degrees of losing." Sherry's mind raced. The warriors had been provoked deliberately, their protective instincts weaponized against them. The darkness understood pack dynamics well enough to exploit them. "You're testing us," she said, "seeing how we react under pressure, trying to provoke responses you can punish. Observing natural behavior. Your wolves cannot maintain suppression indefinitely. Eventually, instinct will override discipline, and when it does, I'll consume them one by one until the entire pack stands hollow." "What do you want?" Sherry asked. "Really? Why attack the packs at all? What's your purpose?" The darkness paused. For a moment, Sherry thought it wouldn't answer. Then, "I am reclamation. I am the return to what was. Before packs, before civilization, before wolves learned to suppress their wild nature with laws and hierarchy, there was chaos. Pure, beautiful chaos, where only the strongest survived and the weak perished as they should. I am bringing that truth back." "So you're destroying packs to, what, return wolves to pre-civilization?" "I am destroying the lie that organization and community make you strong, that bonds and loyalty matter more than individual power. Your packs are built on denial of natural law, that the powerful should dominate and the weak should submit or die. I restore natural order." Understanding clicked in Sherry's mind. You're not just attacking power, you're attacking the social structures that organize power. Pack bonds, hierarchy, cooperation. You see all of it as unnatural. False comforts that make wolves weak. Your ancestors understood. They lived alone or in small groups, fought for every meal, trusted no one. They were strong because they had to be. Modern packs are soft, dependent, weak. And lonely, Sherry said quietly. Your natural order is also isolation. No bonds, no connection, no one to care if you suffer or die alone. The darkness hissed. Sentiment, weakness disguised as strength. No. Connection is what makes survival bearable, what makes it meaningful. Sherry looked at her pack, frightened wolves standing together despite terror, holding on to each other through bonds the darkness wanted to destroy. You think we're weak because we need each other, but needing others is what lets us survive things that would destroy us individually. Pretty philosophy. Let's test it. The darkness surged forward, and suddenly Sherry felt it pressing directly against her mind. Not attacking her will like it had the warriors. Something different, something more targeted. You want to talk about connection? About bonds that matter? Let me show you what your precious bonds really are. Images flooded Sherry's consciousness. Guy rejecting her while the pack watched. The exact moment the mate bond shattered, replayed in agonizing detail. Every wolf's face as they looked away, embarrassed by her pain, relieved it wasn't them being cast aside. Her mother's sad visits, pity mixing with shame that her daughter had been rejected. The unspoken question, what did you do wrong to lose your mate? A year of isolation in the cottage, of being invisible to everyone who mattered, of pack bonds connecting her to wolves who'd rather forget she existed. Every moment of inadequacy, every flash of self-doubt, every night spent wondering if Guy had been right to reject her because she truly wasn't worthy. The darkness took those memories and amplified them, made them fresh and raw and unbearable. Sherry fell to her knees, gasping, drowning in remembered pain. Your bonds hurt you, the darkness whispered. Your pack rejected you. Your mate destroyed you. Connection is just another word for vulnerability that others exploit. Isolation would have been kinder. No, Sherry managed. Isolation would have killed me. You wanted to die. I feel that memory. Nights when you considered just stopping, letting the rejection break you completely. But I didn't. Sherry forced herself to focus through the pain. I didn't die because of the connections I still had, Teresa checking on me, Roseanne's quiet kindness, the archive work that gave me purpose, small connections that kept me anchored when everything else fell apart. Scraps. You survived on scraps of connection that others threw you out of pity. I survived. That's what matters. Not how gracefully, not with what support, just that I endured and came through the other side. Sherry looked up at where she sensed the darkness's focus. You can show me my worst memories forever, can make me relive every pain, every rejection, every moment I wanted to give up. But I already survived all of that once. Doing it again just proves I can endure more than you thought possible. The darkness pulled back slightly. Interesting. You use past survival as shield against present despair. Clever for one so broken. Not broken, reconstructed. Sherry stood on shaking legs. There's a difference. Broken things fall apart. Reconstructed things are put back together deliberately, consciously, knowing exactly where the cracks are and choosing to continue anyway. Through the pack bonds, she felt her wolves responding to her words. Teresa was crying, but standing. Mitzi held Lyle's hand, two old wolves refusing to collapse. Even the young warrior who'd fallen earlier had gotten back up, supported by Van's steady presence. Guy moved to Sherry's side, and she felt his guilt through their connection. Guilt for being the source of the painful memories the darkness had weaponized against her. Don't, she said quietly. Your guilt doesn't help anyone right now. I gave it ammunition to hurt you. You gave me a year of learning to survive pain. That's what saved me just now, not avoiding hurt, but knowing I could endure it. Sherry straightened her Luna circlet, which had shifted when she fell. We're all giving the darkness ammunition by having lived, by having been hurt. The question is whether we let old pain destroy us or prove we're stronger than it realized. The darkness moved through the square again, testing wolves randomly. It would focus on someone, press against their mind, try to find the vulnerability that would break them. Some wolves fell. Most stood. The pack was learning, not to avoid pain, but to endure it without surrendering. Hours passed. The sun climbed toward noon. The psychological pressure never relented, but the pack adapted. Wolves shared their reasons for surviving, reminded each other of what mattered, held steady through waves of induced despair. The darkness seemed frustrated, as if this wasn't going according to its expectations. "You endure," it finally said. "Interesting." The other packs broke within hours. Your warriors fell to protective fury. Your alphas fell to the burden of leadership. Your omegas fell to the certainty of their own worthlessness. But Silvercrest stands. Why? "Because we're honest about being broken," Sherry said. The other packs tried to be strong, to maintain perfect unity, to present confidence they didn't feel. We admitted our vulnerabilities from the start. Hard to break something that's already broken and repaired. Clever, but endurance has limits. How long can you maintain this? Days? Weeks? I have time beyond measure. I can wait for your resolve to crack. "Then wait," Guy said. "We'll be here." "Will you? Your warriors stand hollow already. Your Luna admits to being rejected and broken. Your pack bonds are strained by fear and doubt. How much endurance do you truly have before the cracks become breaks?" It was a good question. Sherry could feel the strain through the pack bonds, wolves reaching their limits, exhaustion and fear wearing down resistance. They'd survived the initial assault, but could they survive hours more? Days? "We'll find out together," Sherry said, "because that's what packs do. We endure together, support each other, share the burden so no one has to carry it alone." Sentiment again. I should consume your will right now, little Luna. Show your pack what happens to leaders who rely on philosophy instead of power. "You could," Sherry agreed, "but you haven't. Why?" Silence. The darkness swirled but didn't strike. "You're curious," Sherry realized. "We're doing something different from the other packs, responding in ways you didn't expect, and you want to understand it before you destroy us. I want to understand why broken wolves think they can stand against ancient power, why a rejected Omega believes she can lead others through despair when she could barely survive her own. Because I did survive my own. That's the whole point. I'm not theoretical about surviving hopelessness. I have practical experience with it. And now I'm teaching that experience to my pack." The darkness pressed closer to Sherry again, and she felt its attention focusing with terrible intensity. "Then let's truly test that experience. Let's see if surviving rejection prepares you to survive watching everything you've built fall apart." Before Sherry could react, the darkness surged outward, touching every wolf in the square simultaneously. The pack bonds flared with agony as 300 wolves experienced personalized despair, each one facing their worst fear, their deepest pain, their most profound loss all at once. Sherry felt it through the Luna bonds, felt her wolves breaking, falling, giving up under the weight of concentrated psychological warfare, and realized the darkness had been holding back until now, assessing them, learning their vulnerabilities, preparing for this moment when it would strike with precision instead of brute force. Her pack was collapsing, and Sherry had perhaps seconds to find a way to save them. Chapter 10. The Heart of Resistance. 300 wolves fell to their knees simultaneously. Sherry felt it through the pack bonds, a cascade of breaking will, of hope draining away like water through shattered glass. The darkness had learned their individual vulnerabilities through hours of testing, and now it struck with surgical precision.
Teresa collapsed, sobbing. Through their bond, Sherry felt her friend's despair, visions of her sister dying alone, unreachable, the laugh Teresa would never hear again. Lyle crumpled beside his grandson's imagined corpse, the questions forever unanswered. Young Christopher stared at nothing, convinced he'd never mattered, never would matter, that his existence was as insignificant as the darkness claimed. One by one, her wolves surrendered to personalized nightmares, not dead, worse, hollow, convinced that resistance was meaningless and survival wasn't worth the effort. Guy stood beside Sherry, still upright but shaking. "We're losing them. Sherry, we're losing everyone." "I know." Sherry's voice was steady despite the terror flooding through her. The darkness learned our individual weaknesses. Now it's exploiting all of them at once. "Precisely," the ancient voice said with satisfaction. "I told you endurance has limits. Your wolves are strong, stronger than most. But everyone breaks eventually when faced with their worst fears made manifest." Sherry looked at her fallen pack. 300 wolves drowning in despair. The Luna bonds connecting her to each one, carrying their individual agonies directly into her consciousness. She felt their pain, their certainty that nothing mattered, their desire to simply stop fighting and let the darkness take them. It would be easy to fall, too, to let the weight of 300 breaking minds pull her down, to surrender to the inevitability the darkness promised. But Luna Edith's words echoed in her memory. Being Luna isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing to see clearly even when the truth is uncomfortable. Sherry looked at the darkness, really looked, with the clear sight that had let her pass the trial, and she saw something the darkness hadn't intended to reveal. "You're afraid," she said quietly. The darkness stilled. "I fear nothing. I am inevitability made manifest." "No, you're afraid of what we represent, of pack bonds and connection and the idea that wolves don't have to be isolated to be strong." Sherry's mind raced, pieces clicking together. "That's why you attack packs specifically, why you target organized groups instead of lone wolves. You're not trying to restore natural order. You're trying to destroy something that threatens you." Ridiculous. What could threaten ancient power? Connection that survives despite pain, bonds that hold even when broken, the stubborn refusal to give up on each other even when giving up would be easier. Sherry took a step toward where she sensed the darkness's center. You consume individual will because you can't touch shared will. You can break one wolf at a time, but you can't break the bonds between them. That's why you worked so hard to learn our vulnerabilities. You needed to attack us individually because attacking us collectively doesn't work. Philosophy won't save your pack. They're already broken. No, they're breaking. There's a difference. Sherry closed her eyes, focused on the Luna bonds connecting her to every wolf. And I'm still standing, still connected to all of them, still able to reach them through the bonds. "Sherry, what are you doing?" Guy asked, alarm in his voice. Something incredibly stupid or incredibly brilliant, not sure which yet. Sherry opened her eyes. "Guy, I need you to suppress your alpha power completely, not just mask it, pull it back entirely. Stop projecting dominance, stop maintaining authority. Just be a wolf, nothing more." "That will destabilize the entire pack structure." "The pack structure is already broken. Our wolves are on the ground, drowning in despair. Traditional hierarchy isn't helping them. I need you to trust me." She met his eyes. "Please, one more time. Trust me when I say we need to do something that goes against every instinct." Guy stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right, I trust you." She felt it through their connection. Guy deliberately releasing his alpha power, letting it pull back into himself until he was just a wolf standing beside her. Not commanding, not dominant, not leading, just present.
The pack bonds shifted, destabilized without alpha presence anchoring them. Wolves whimpered as the familiar structure dissolved. "Now me," Sherry said. She looked at the Luna circlet on her head, symbol of authority she'd worn for less than 3 days. Luna power comes from connection, from nurturing bonds, from holding the pack together emotionally. But right now, my wolves don't need me to hold them together with authority. They need me to remind them how to hold themselves together. "What are you doing?" The darkness's voice carried curiosity and something else. Concern? "Teaching you something about pack bonds." Sherry reached up, removed the Luna circlet, set it on the ground. "I'm not Luna right now, not an authority figure maintaining structure through power. Just Sherry, just a wolf who survived rejection and learned to find worth in herself." She felt the Luna bonds shift as she released the formal authority. But they didn't break, couldn't break. They were pack bonds, not just leadership bonds. She was still connected to every wolf, but now the connection was different, more equal, more honest. "You're risking everything," Guy said quietly. "I'm risking the structure that wasn't working anyway." Sherry turned her attention inward to the pack bonds, to 300 connections carrying 300 individual despairs directly into her awareness. And instead of shielding herself from their pain, she opened to it completely. Teresa's grief at imagined loss flooded through. Christopher's certainty of worthlessness, Lyle's despair over time running out, Fernando's horror at failing to protect his daughter, every individual nightmare, every personal terror, every wolf's worst fear. Sherry let them all pour through the Luna bonds into her consciousness. It was agony, like drowning in collective despair, like being torn apart by 300 different kinds of pain simultaneously. Sherry's knees buckled, her vision blurred. The weight of so much suffering was physically crushing. "Sherry!" Guy caught her as she fell. "Don't stop me," she gasped. "This is the only way." Because she'd realized something crucial. The darkness attacked individuals, broke them one by making each wolf feel isolated in their pain, alone in their despair, convinced that no one else could understand their specific agony. But Luna bonds connected everyone. Through her, the pack could feel each other's pain, not as separate agonies, but as shared experience. Sherry stopped trying to shield or filter the emotions flowing through the bonds. Instead, she amplified them, broadcast them, let every wolf feel not just their own despair, but everyone else's too. Through the bonds, Teresa felt Christopher's fear of meaninglessness and recognized her own fear of insignificance. Christopher felt Lyle's grief over time lost and understood his own anxiety about wasted potential. Lyle felt Fernando's terror of failing those he loved and knew his own fears of inadequacy. Every wolf experienced their pain, validated by others feeling similar pain. Every individual nightmare revealed itself as a variation on universal fears: loss, worthlessness, isolation, failure. You couldn't feel so alone in your despair when you felt 300 other wolves experiencing versions of the same thing. The darkness noticed the shift. "What are you doing? Stop!" "I'm showing my pack that they're not alone," Sherry said through gritted teeth, "that their worst fears aren't unique, that everyone breaks sometimes, everyone feels worthless sometimes, everyone fears inadequacy and loss and death. You're overwhelming them with collective pain. I'm showing them that pain is survivable, that what feels unbearable alone becomes bearable when shared." Sherry forced herself upright, blood trickling from her nose from the strain of channeling so much emotional intensity. You worked so hard to break each wolf individually, to make them feel isolated in their suffering, but you forgot something crucial about pack bonds. What? Shared pain hurts less than isolated pain. Collective grief is more bearable than personal grief.
When you know others feel what you feel, understand what you're experiencing, survive the same nightmares, you realize you can survive too. Through the bonds, wolves began stirring, not because their pain had lessened, but because they felt others surviving the same pain. Teresa pushed herself up, tears still streaming but eyes clearing. Christopher took a shaking breath, anchored by feeling other wolves' similar fears. Lyle reached for Mitzi's hand, both old wolves sharing grief over lost time. One by one, Sherry's pack began standing back up. Not because the darkness's attack had stopped, it hadn't. The nightmares still raged, the despair still pressed down with crushing weight, but the wolves were enduring it together now, connected through bonds that let them share the burden instead of carrying it alone. No, this isn't, you can't. The darkness's voice carried something Sherry had never heard before. Panic. Individual will should break under this pressure. Collective will shouldn't be possible when each wolf faces personalized despair. But it is possible, Sherry said, because you misunderstood what pack bonds are. They're not just hierarchy and structure and authority. They're shared experience, empathy, the knowledge that you're not alone even in your worst moments. The darkness surged toward Sherry specifically, and she felt its full attention focused on her like a physical weight. Then I'll break you, little Luna. Break the center of those bonds and watch them collapse without you holding them together. I'm not holding them together through power. I'm just reminding them how to hold each other. Sherry smiled despite the pressure crushing down on her. You can break me, but you can't break 300 connections simultaneously. And even if you consume my will, the bonds remain. The pack remains. They'll survive without me if they have to. Impossible. Every pack has failed once the Alpha or Luna falls. Because they relied on authority to maintain structure. We're relying on connection, on each wolf choosing to stand for themselves and for each other. Sherry felt her wolves through the bonds, still afraid, still in pain, but standing together. That's the difference between us and the packs that fell. We admitted we were broken from the start, didn't try to maintain false strength or perfect unity, just acknowledged that we're all damaged and choosing to survive anyway. Guy moved to stand beside her. She's right. You picked the wrong pack to try to break with isolation and individual despair. We're all rejected in some way, all broken, all familiar with surviving pain that should have destroyed us. Through the bonds, Sherry felt her wolves' agreement, Fernando's shame about briefly falling, Teresa's year of watching her friends suffer, Christopher's lifetime of feeling insignificant, Lyle and Mitzi's grief over warriors they'd outlived, Van's guilt about times he'd failed as Beta, Edna's fear that she'd never be more than adequate. Everyone carried pain. Everyone had been broken by something, and instead of hiding those breaks, they were using them as proof that breaks could be survived. The darkness pulled back slightly, and Sherry felt it reassessing, recalculating. You've endured longer than expected, adapted in ways I didn't anticipate, but endurance isn't victory. I can wait, can press this assault for days, weeks if needed. Eventually, your wolves will exhaust themselves maintaining this connection. Eventually, someone will break completely, and the collective will fragment. Maybe, Sherry admitted. We're not invincible. We're not even particularly strong by traditional measures, but we're stubborn, and we have reasons to keep standing. She thought about Fernando's daughter and her butterfly drawings, about Teresa's sister's laugh, about Lyle's grandson's questions, about all the small, specific, personal reasons 300 wolves had chosen to survive. You said you're trying to restore natural order, Sherry continued, that bonds and cooperation make us weak, but you're wrong. Connection is what makes survival meaningful, what makes enduring pain worthwhile. You're offering us individual strength through isolation. We're choosing collective resilience through connection, philosophy, experience. I'm a rejected Omega who survived by finding small connections when the big one failed. Guy's an Alpha who learned that isolation in leadership leads to catastrophic mistakes. Every wolf here has learned that trying to be strong alone is harder than being strong together. Sherry looked at her standing pack. We're not defeating you with power or magic or clever tactics. We're just refusing to break the way you expect us to. And that refusal is contagious. The darkness was silent for a long moment. Then, this isn't over. I will return. We'll test you again and again until I find the breaking point every pack possesses. Then we'll stand again and again. That's what we do. Sherry felt exhaustion pulling at her, but she kept her spine straight. Because we're Silver Crest Pack. We're broken wolves who learn to be strong anyway. And that's a kind of power you don't understand. The darkness began to pull back, slowly, reluctantly, but definitively. It hadn't been defeated, couldn't be defeated, really, but it had been resisted, successfully. For the first time in 5 packs, wolves had stood against the ancient despair and refused to collapse. I will remember this, little Luna. Remember you. When I return, I will break you first, personally, thoroughly, and I will make your pack watch. If you return, we'll be here, still standing, still choosing each other over isolation. Sherry's voice was steady despite her trembling. That's all we can promise. Not victory, just refusal to surrender. The darkness retreated beyond Silvercrest's borders, leaving only lingering cold in its wake. The psychological pressure lifted gradually, like storm clouds clearing after heavy rain. For a moment, the pack stood in absolute silence. 300 wolves still connected through bonds, still feeling each other's exhaustion and fear and desperate relief, still standing. Then Teresa laughed. Not a happy laugh, just a slightly hysterical release of tension. We survived. We actually survived. We survived, Christopher echoed, sounding amazed. Around the square, wolves began sitting down, lying down, collapsing from sheer exhaustion. Not falling to despair, just physically and emotionally spent from hours of sustained psychological warfare. Guy helped Sherry sit before she fell. That was the most insane thing I've ever witnessed, and it worked. Barely worked. We lost 6 warriors permanently. Sherry looked at Fernando and the others still standing hollow, their wills consumed. They're gone. Their bodies are alive, but they're not coming back. 6 lost instead of 300, Van said quietly, joining them, against something that destroyed 4 entire packs. That's better than we had any right to hope for. Roseanne moved through the square, checking on wolves one by one. Most were physically fine, but emotionally devastated. She'd be treating psychological trauma for weeks, maybe months, but they were alive, functional. Still capable of feeling and hoping and caring. Still a pack. Sherry picked up her Luna circlet from where she'd set it down. The silver felt heavier now, weighted with responsibility and the knowledge of what leadership had cost. She put it back on. The Luna bond snapped into place with renewed strength. Not just connections now, chosen connections. 300 wolves who'd stood together through nightmare and chose to remain connected despite the cost. What happens now? Teresa asked, moving to sit beside Sherry. The darkness said it would return. Then we prepare again. Build on what we learned. Get stronger at this kind of resistance. Sherry looked at her exhausted pack. We didn't defeat it, just survived one encounter. But that's more than 4 other packs managed. Because we did it differently, Guy said. He was still suppressing his alpha power, letting the pack recover without the weight of dominance pressing down on them. Admitted weakness instead of projecting strength. Shared pain instead of hiding it. Connected through vulnerability instead of authority. It shouldn't have worked, Elder Nelda said, joining them. She looked shaken but steady.
Everything I know about pack structure says vulnerability in leadership causes collapse. But you used vulnerability as strength. How? Because wolves are tired of pretending, Sherry said. Tired of acting like we're always strong, always certain, always capable. Sometimes we're weak and confused and terrified. Acknowledging that doesn't make us more vulnerable. It makes us honest. And honesty builds trust in ways false strength never can. Fernando approached. The real Fernando, not the hollow shell the darkness had left behind. His eyes were haunted but clear. "The Luna saved me," he said quietly. "I felt it through the pack bonds. When the darkness consumed my will, when I was empty, I felt the collective pull. 300 wolves surviving their own nightmares, and that survival gave me something to hold on to, just enough to resist complete consumption." "I thought you were gone," Sherry said. "Thought the darkness had taken you permanently." "It did, but you built something stronger than individual will. Collective will brought me back." Fernando knelt before her, a head warrior showing respect to an Omega Luna. "I doubted you. Thought suppressing power was cowardice. I was wrong. What you built today, shared resilience through connection. That's the strongest defense I've ever witnessed." The other warriors who'd fallen and recovered echoed Fernando's words. What should have been permanent damage had been partially reversed by pack bonds carrying shared will, strong enough to pull them back from the void. Not completely healed, they'd carry scars from what the darkness had done, but alive, functional, still capable of choosing to stand. As afternoon turned to evening, the pack began to recover. Wolves shared food, checked on each other, told stories about what they'd experienced and how they'd survived. The collective trauma was processed collectively, no one left to suffer alone. Sherry felt it through the Luna bonds, her pack knitting itself back together, not through hierarchy or authority, but through genuine care and connection. What the darkness had tried to destroy had emerged stronger, tempered by shared ordeal. Guy found her on the pack house balcony as sunset painted the sky red and gold. "The council wants to declare this a victory," he said, leaning against the railing beside her. "Call for celebrations, formal recognition, the whole thing." "It's not a victory, just successful survival." Sherry watched the sun sink toward the horizon. "The darkness will return," said so specifically, "and next time it'll be prepared for our strategy. We'll have to adapt again. Then we'll adapt together." Guy was quiet for a moment. "I learned something today about leadership, about strength, about what actually matters when everything breaks." "What did you learn?" "That rejecting you was the worst mistake I could have made. Not because of the mate bond, that's gone. I understand that. But because you see things I can't see. Think in ways I can't think. Lead through connection where I only know how to lead through authority." Guy's voice roughened. The prophecy said bonding with you would destroy the pack, but today proved the opposite. Your specific leadership, broken Omega, who learned to survive through connection. That's exactly what saved us. Sherry didn't know what to say. The mate bond was severed, dead, impossible to restore. But the partnership between Alpha and Luna that had been forged today in ways no ceremony could have created. "We're not mates," she said finally. "Can never be mates. That future died the night you rejected me." "I know, but we're partners. Real partners, built on acknowledged mistakes and shared survival and honest assessment of our flaws." Sherry looked at him. "Is that enough? Can we lead together with a broken bond between us?" Guy smiled, sad but genuine. "Today proved we can. Maybe better than we could have with an intact bond, because we're not distracted by romance or destiny, just focused on keeping our pack alive through impossible odds. That's pragmatic. That's reality, and reality is what you taught me to see clearly today." Guy straightened. "The council wants to talk about fortifying for the darkness's return. Will you join?" In a moment. I need to check the bonds first. Make sure everyone's settling. Sherry closed her eyes, felt through the Luna connections to 300 wolves scattered across the territory. They were okay, traumatized, exhausted, but okay. And more than that, they were together. Connected by shared experience that the darkness had tried to use to break them, but which had instead become their greatest strength. Sherry opened her eyes, looked out at Silvercrest territory. Her territory now, in ways that went deeper than ceremony or rank. These were her wolves, her pack, her responsibility, and she would keep them alive through whatever came next, not through power or authority or traditional strength, but through connection, through honesty, through the stubborn refusal to let despair have the final word. Because that's what broken wolves did. They survived, they adapted, they stood. Together. The darkness had learned that lesson today, and if it returned, when it returned, Silvercrest would teach it again, as many times as necessary, for as long as it took, until ancient power understood that pack bonds were stronger than isolation. That shared pain was more bearable than individual suffering. That connection was the ultimate resistance against despair. Sherry descended from the balcony to join the council meeting. Her pack was waiting, and together they would face whatever darkness came. Epilogue. 3 months later, the evacuated children returned home to a territory that had survived the impossible. They came back slowly in small groups, guardians checking carefully that the threat had truly passed. Autumn Barton ran to her father, Fernando, butterfly drawings clutched in her hands, demanding to know if he'd missed her. He picked her up, held her tight, and told her about the darkness and the Luna and the day Silvercrest learned to stand by refusing to fight. She listened with wide eyes, then showed him her newest drawing, 300 butterflies connected by delicate threads, each one different but all part of the same pattern. Like the pack bonds? She asked. Exactly like the pack bonds, Fernando agreed. Around the territory, life returned to normal. Warriors resumed training. Omegas resumed their duties. Hierarchy reasserted itself naturally, wolves falling back into familiar ranks and roles. But something fundamental had changed. Wolves checked on each other more now, shared vulnerabilities more openly, acknowledged when they struggled instead of hiding weakness behind false strength. The darkness had tried to break them by isolating them in individual despair. Instead, it had taught them the value of connection too deep to sever. Sherry stood in the archives, organizing records like she'd done before becoming Luna. But now wolves came to visit, not for official business, but just to talk, to share burdens, to connect with the Luna who'd taught them that broken didn't mean defeated. Guy found her there one afternoon, watching her work with a soft expression. "The scouts reported something," he said. "The darkness has moved further south, approached 2 other territories. Both packs tried traditional defense. Both fell within days." Sherry set down the record she'd been cataloging. "So it continues, consuming packs one by one. Until it meets another pack that responds the way we did. That adapts instead of fighting." Guy moved to stand beside her. "Other alphas are asking for advice, wanting to know how we survived. What should I tell them?" "Tell them the truth. That strength comes in forms they don't expect. That connection is more powerful than isolation. That acknowledging weakness is the first step to real resilience." Sherry looked at the ancient records surrounding them. Tell them to find their Luna Ediths, their rejected Omegas, their broken wolves who learn to survive anyway, because those are the wolves who see clearly enough to lead through darkness. "I'll tell them," Guy promised, though I doubt many will listen. Traditional alphas don't trust untraditional strategies. Then they'll fall like the others fell, and eventually only the packs who learn to adapt will remain. Sherry returned to her organizing. That's how evolution works. Not the strongest survive, the most adaptable do. Guy was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you regret it? Accepting Luna
Everything that came with it? Sherry considered the question seriously. Thought about the trial, the ceremony, the darkness's attack, the weight of 300 lives depending on her seeing clearly. No, she said finally. Being rejected broke me, but becoming Luna taught me that broken things can be rebuilt into something stronger than the original. I'm not the Luna anyone expected, but I'm exactly the Luna Silvercrest needed. And we're lucky to have you, Guy said, even if the path here was painful for both of us. Especially because the path was painful, easy victories teach nothing. Hard-won survival teaches everything. Sherry smiled. Now get out of my archive. Some of us have actual work to do instead of just standing around looking alpha-like. Guy laughed and left, but the warmth remained. Partnership built on shared trauma, mutual respect, and the understanding that they'd survive the impossible together. Outside the archive window, Silvercrest Pack continued its daily life. Children played in the square, warriors trained in the yards, Omegas worked in peace, knowing their Luna had proven that rank didn't define worth. And deep in everyone's consciousness, connected through bonds that had been tested and strengthened by darkness, was the knowledge that they'd faced despair and refused to surrender, that they'd stood together when standing alone would have been easier, that they were Silvercrest Pack, broken wolves who learned to be strong anyway. The darkness would return someday. Other threats would emerge. Leadership would face new challenges. But Sherry wasn't afraid, because she'd learned the most important lesson any Luna could learn. Survival isn't about being unbreakable. It's about being willing to stand back up after breaking, again and again, for as long as it takes, together. As Silvercrest's story ends, a thought. Which moment in this journey hit closest to home for you and why? Let me know in the comments. And if you believe more people need to hear that survival isn't about being unbreakable, show some love by liking this video.